We did it. We did it. Not gonna lie to you guys, man. I'm having a real rough day. I'm having a real rough day. The situation with my glasses is going exactly as I thought it would. My eyes hurt. I have a headache all the time. Um, such is the nature, right? This is why I can't just like buy cheap glasses off on the internet, right? Like any kind of little moderate change or any kind of little thing, and it's just becomes very untenable and very unlivable. And I'm annoyed that I'm gonna have to go through a weekend of work wearing these stupid looking glasses that don't sit on my face properly. Ugh. It's annoying, man. And it hits me in that like real like man, like good evening guys, Barnabas, Eric, how you guys doing? Like my sight is like a luxury item in this society. That's the thing that really like keeps spiraling over and over and over again in my consciousness. Is like we know that we're living in a system of extraction and abandonment. But when it hits me on a very personal level, and this is a very personal level, like it's my sight, it's my ability to see. It gets very difficult for me. You're frustrated, Eric. What's frustrating you, bud? Besides, everything. Besides the whole thing. Like, we could very easily have a universal healthcare system that included, like, dental, eye coverage, and for all those NDP types, right? For all those NDP types who are walking around patting themselves on the back, it'll be in the Discord. Patting themselves on the back. Yeah, we got dental. Yeah, woo, we got dental. Well, the government has just over 6 months to launch a complete new program, but still appears to be in the consultation phase of planning and hasn't settled on the basic question. What form will this program take? One of the options is for the program to be delivered as a federal transfer to provinces, which would either administer it alongside existing dental programs or amalgamate them together. But the NDP have always pitched the program as a standalone federal dental insurance plan, administered by federal staff to fill the gaps in the patchwork of provincial and private programs across the country. A third option, to contract the program out to private company, is also on the table. What do you think is going to happen here, guys? Like, what do you actually think is going to happen here? For all these like NDP types that are going like, yeah, we did it, yeah, dental, woo, yeah. Like, from the outset, they're just saying, yeah, we just privatize it. Just let a private industry take care of it, right? From the outset. Hey, Lonnie. Hey, Nova Scotia. How you doing? I tried doing some Duolingo practice, my friends. After an hour, I got a headache and light sensitive, dude. I'm so sorry to hear that, man. I'm sorry that you're going through that shit. It's so lame. Like, it's so lame that you got the short end of the stick on the COVID thing, man. It's that is a tough time, man. I know that right now I'm going through, not like, it's probably not the same, right? But like, I can't look at things for very long, or else my eyes just get very tired, and I'm feeling very like, yeah, all the time. And and I've got work to do. I got things to do, and it's just, and of course the spiral is just the. Pause the show. I've got like a 3-minute commercial here. Oh well. I'm glad to hear that you are getting the commercials. Honestly, I'm sorry that you're getting the commercials, Adam. I'm not a big fan of the fact that I've got to sell myself to capitalism. But what was the commercial? I want to know. They don't tell me anything. Like, they just put commercials on it, and I don't know who it is. I think my favorite commercial that ends up on here is when it's Shen Yu. I think that's funny. That's real funny. That like they're using communist channels to advertise anti-communist propaganda. Like, I think it would be the best if the commercials that ended up on my shit were like literally the Epic Times. That would be the most funny, in my view. Just like, hey, here's a guy who calls himself a communist and is trying to promote communist ideals. Let's put anti-communist propaganda on his ads on his stuff. I'm sure that'll work, right? That's hitting the base audience. I had to take a gram of mushrooms to break my depression a couple of days ago. Yeah, everyone is under pressure. That's not a bad idea, dude, honestly. Like, and I think the thing that is really hurting everybody is that there's no relief in sight. Nothing serious, right? There's just no relief at all. And like, we here in Ontario, we got 4 more years of this fat, dumb, college dropout, wife-beating idiot whose plans are going to all fail, and who is probably the worst thing. I don't think I can say probably. Like, he is the worst premier the province has ever had. Like, I'm waiting for someone to show up and tell me any differently. But like, he is this is like rife incompetence. Like, we would be better off with a literal clown. And then federally, like, the Liberal NDP alliance is like, what are they doing? Like, what are they even talking about? What do they even care about? You know, their confrontation with the housing market is literally like, yeah, we'll just let investors continue buying up the housing market, pretend like that's not happening. Release, you know, Canada needs all hands on deck to fill housing supply gap, right? This is the only thing that they're going to talk about. So what is this going to boil down to, right? Housing supply gap. They're saying, oh, we don't have enough houses built. Forget about the fact that like 20 to 40% of the market is owned by the investor class, who just sits on it and doesn't do anything worthwhile with it. No, it's that we don't have enough built. And so what are they going to do? They're going to take your tax dollars, they're going to give it to private contractors who are going to build a bunch of shitty housing as fast as possible. And then who's going to buy it? Oh, the investors, right? Who own the companies that we just gave a bunch of money to in the first place. So it's like it's as fraudulent as it can get. And of course, Global News, owned by the billionaire class, isn't going to report on it. Of course, this is overt, obvious, like, very clearly propaganda that we're being fed, but people are suckers and they're buying it. So I just saw that Pierre video where he goes on about freedom being Canada's nationality and fighting for it. Yeah, I thought that was a very effective video, actually, Lonnie. Like, this is why I keep saying, like, Pierre Poilievre is gonna run a very effective campaign. Like, he's very persuasive. He sounds very good. He looks good. He's very effective at what he's saying, and he understands why people are angry, and he understands that the way to convince them is to lie to them. Like, I just don't see a path where he doesn't become the guy, right? Like, when you look at O'Toole and you look at Scheer, first of all, these guys looked like goobers, right? Both of them. They were both just kind of goobers. Although Andrew Scheer recently has been doing some stuff where I'm like, dude, where was this guy? Like, I feel like Andrew Scheer had a real, like, moment recently where, like, about a year ago, I think he maybe he went to some kind of convention or something and actually had, like, maybe he did a whole bunch of mushrooms. Maybe Andrew Scheer did like a ton of mushrooms and then, like, had a come to Jesus moment and actually suddenly became, like, kind of a cool guy. This happens all the time to politicians, that when they campaign and when it's their shot, they get real tight and they get real, like, about everything. And then afterwards, when they've got nothing to lose and they're just kind of, you know, in the end, they loosen up. Like, this is Al Gore, right? Al Gore, like, loosened up and kind of became a cool guy after he lost. Well, after he won and had the election stolen from him, but that's fine. Which I think is the greatest irony in American politics right now. All these Republicans walking around being like, stop the steal, Donald Trump had the election stolen, and, like, Al Gore, like, literally had the election stolen from him. Like, in front of everybody. It was publicly done. They stole the election from him publicly. And Al Gore was basically just like, okay about it. Right? Asterisk, word, asterisk. Good to see you, Mocked. Good to see you, bud. And, but yeah, like, Scheer and O'Toole were always goobers who were trying to jam down the throats of the Canadian public an ideology that the Canadian public doesn't like, right? Like they don't like the conservative messaging. They don't like what the conservatives are selling, obviously, right? And they kept trying to like polish up that pig, and they kept trying to put lipstick on that pig, right? But over and over and over, the Canadians have shown like, nah, we're willing to throw our chips in with like a blackface loser, lying idiot who is only really there because he's got his daddy's last name over these guys. And so here comes Pierre Poilievre, who doesn't look like a goober. He sounds good. He speaks well. He puts together a case. He appears sympathetic. His voice is strong. And he is giving an alternative message. He's giving a different message. Now, does it mean that he's going to rule the party any differently? No, obviously, to anybody who actually pays attention. But if you're just like a regular Canadian rube, right, you're going to listen to Pierre Poilievre and you're going to be like, wow, yeah, that's right, freedom, and all, yeah, that's right, I feel like things are going, yeah, right. Grumble, grumble. And it's starting to manifest itself. Conservatives see an opportunity with young people, right? Like, guys, straight up, like, we're going to go through 3-4 years of total catastrophic bullshit with these guys. Like, these liberals and the Liberal NDP alliance is a disaster, a total disaster. And the Ford administration is a complete catastrophe. By the time we get to the next election, people are going to be begging for Pierre Poilievre to take over. People are going to be begging to get rid of these guys. Like, they're going to be screaming in the streets for it. And Pierre's going to come along, and he's shown very clearly that he's willing to look at the populace action and the populace energy and galvanize it. This is your next prime minister, man. Like, and I understand that there are roadblocks, there are things that can happen, but it's pretty unlikely to me that any other scenario is going to play out. Like, who's still voting Liberal in 4 years after this bullshit? It's illegal to fight my depression. Yeah, what a shithole, USA. Yeah, like, I mean, you're eating a plant. Like, that's how you know, right? Like, your society has delegitimized itself. Here is a plant that grows out of the ground that we're literally making it a crime to harvest, sell, and consume. Like, you can say to people, don't eat, poisonous plants. But if somebody picks up a poisonous plant and eats it, and then, like, needs to go to hospital over it or any of that, you don't arrest them, right? So why are they arresting people for consuming, like, psychedelic plants? What's the story there? Like, what it is, like, it's just another piece of evidence that shows that the society has delegitimized itself, that the system has delegitimized itself. Every house I see going up for sale is gone in a week and then just sits there vacant until it's sold again. Yep. Billionaires trading houses like Pokemon cards. Yep. And that's basically the foundation of our economy, right? That, like, actual organizations that actually are attempting to talk about real economics, like the OECD, are being very upfront and open about what's going on in our economy, right? That our economy is facing, like, a real decline. We are going to be the worst developed economy, according to the OECD, over the next 3 decades. And, like, it's 100% because instead of spending our accrued capital on doing things and building things and creating infrastructure and improving the society, or even investing in social infrastructure of any sort, we're literally just using it to let billionaires trade houses with one another. It's completely untenable. Like it is going to collapse, right? It's just like the crypto market, right? Like fake economies like that are based on nothing don't last, right? If you wanted a biblical story for it, right? It's the person who builds the house on the sandy shore, right? But maybe it'll stand for a little while, but the house will eventually collapse because it's built on sand, right? And if you want it to stand, you've got to build it on a rock. Mystic, how you doing? I just realized John looks like Benjamin Franklin. Not too much longer, dude. This beard is coming back in. You wait. The beard's coming back in. And honestly, like, Ben Franklin. What a character that guy was. Good to see you, Mystic. Are you on the Discord? No. It's just $1, Mocked. It's just $1. $1 in the Patreon gets you into the Discord. And like, share, subscribe, guys. Send it around. Tell people I exist. I worry that yesterday we had a whole bunch of new people and I alienated all of them because I was really pissed off yesterday. Psychedelics will show people how they're being screwed, therefore they need to keep it illegal. Yeah. I mean, I can't think of any other reason why they would make psychedelics illegal. Like, to me, it seems very clear that you make this stuff illegal because it allows people to enter a meta state of understanding of their surroundings, right? And that to me, like, and to the capitalist class, obvious, is the worst thing to happen in the society. You do not want people to get a meta view of the society and to understand what the society looks like and your place in it. Because you got to keep people dull. You got to keep people in a state. And that's why there's this hyper focus on individualism, right? Because if you just focus on your own individual journey and your own individual self, don't focus on the meta. Don't focus on the on meta concerns or what's going on in any kind of meta sense. Then you'll never really realize that you live in a slave society, right? And that's the bottom line. Like it is essentially a wage slave system, and then you throw in the prison slavery, and it's straight up just normal slavery again, right? So they've got to do everything they can to get rid of it, so that you'll never actually see like, oh shit, there's like a grander story than simply the false narrative that I am the protagonist of a hero's journey, which is what which is like a Nazi ideology. It's the ideology of the devil. It's the ideology of Jordan Peterson, that you are a protagonist in a hero's journey story, and everyone around you is an NPC. That's essentially the prevailing ideology. And the alternative narrative, of course, is you are one of many living in a massive multiplayer RPG, collectively building a lived reality. And that's actually the truth. Like, it's not your perceived, like, it doesn't come from your perception, right? Which is the protagonist journey that you're on. Like, that you're the hero of your own narrative and you're the author of your own fate. That's a narrow view created by people who have never actually got into the meta understanding. Because I remembers you're versed on USSR history, so if you want to ask about Soviet history. What's going on here? Sorry. A conservative MP who told an Ottawa radio station that former residential schools need a stronger worth, school students need a stronger worth ethic, not more passionate dollars, has apologized for his comments. Yeah, I mean, at least he apologized. That's nice. Tell them all I am for freedom, you are for freedom of speech in the workplace. After all, capitalist is the greatest violator of free speech. Yeah, you can't, there's no such thing as free speech in the corporation. They're totalitarian dictatorships, and they're explicit about it. Like, if you say this to a manager, right, what are they going to say to you, right? Well, you're paid to be here, so you're going to be paid to follow these rules. They say it to your face, openly. And if you fight that, they'll just get rid of you, right? It's a totalitarian dictatorship. And it's the basis of our society. We're a series of totalitarian dictatorships which own the political apparatus. And you've got a bunch of NDP liberal types walking around being like, we can vote that away. Yeah, good luck. I am for freedom of speech in the workplace. Not sure what you're asking. I got a question. Did the 80s and 90s have Karens? Yeah, the whole Karen thing, like, these people have always existed. They've just never been named like this, right? They've just never had, like, the name Karen. Like, that kind of came out of the Gen Z crowd. The Gen Z crowd started to call them Karens and give them that moniker, right? But these people always existed. Just, like, hyper entitled, hyper self-interested, right? Because if you're the protagonist in a story and everyone else around you is an NPC, well, when the NPCs stop acting like NPCs and start acting like they too are player characters who demand respect, then you have every right to treat them badly because they're just NPCs, right? The next revolution will be in the metaverse, virtual protests. Yeah, right. Boy, the ruling class would be over the moon about that. If everybody just took all of their angst and anger and just diffused it into the digital spaces, boy, they'd be losing their minds about that shit. They did have Karens, they were just not labeled Karens yet. Karens are as old as time. Song as old as time. The point is that if you ask them, they will call you a communist. Nonsense. Yeah. I try to keep my views outside of work. Well, I mean, they'll make you do it. Like, it's not that you're voluntarily keeping your views outside of work. It's that if you start to talk that way, they will fire you. Like, that you will be fired as an agitator. You will be fired as and especially now in this upswell of unionization that exists, right? They're not going to let somebody walking around talking about, like, hey, maybe we should share. Hey, maybe the workers should own the means of production, right? You're not going to last. Like, they're going to get rid of you. They're going to get rid of you fast. I've seen it. Like, and it's going to get way worse. Like, it's going to get way, way worse. Like, we're in the clampdown. That the death cult and the totalitarian dictatorship systems are going to get more aggressive. You can see that in the push to get people back into the workplace instead of working from home, right? Like, why would any, like, rational thinking business do this? Most of the people who are doing it are glad that they're doing it, and they want to continue doing it, and they're more productive, they're making you more money, but you can't dominate them so effectively. It's harder to dominate and control them. That's what it comes down to, right? That the people walking around saying we want to reaffirm workplace culture, you see a lot of that, right? We need to reestablish a workplace culture, right? They're basically just admitting to your face that we need to dominate and control. That the workplace culture is one of domination and humiliation, and you can't have freedom. Like, you can't exist in a space where your work and life balance are achieved by your own merit, and that you can't base the time that you're putting in based on whether or not you do the work, right? Like, I figured this out way back in school, right? Like, you have a classroom setting, right? You have an hour for a class, let's say, right? But you get the work done in 15 minutes because the work's not hard, and then you sit there for another 45 minutes. I distinctly remember I had one teacher who I would finish the work in 15 minutes because it wasn't hard, and then I would pull out other work from other classes and be like, okay, I'll just finish this. And she would come over and she would prevent me from doing that because it didn't associate with the class that I was doing right here. So instead of, like, doing my math homework, I would be doing the English homework or whatever. And she would come over and stop me. And it was just to assert her dominance and to dominate me. That's the only reason. And I would just walk out of her class, right? Like, like that's literally what I did every single time. I just walked out of her class, and yeah, I got in trouble for it a lot, but like I knew from very early on, like I'm talking like 14, I knew that like this system was a system of dominance and control, and it was worthless. Like there's nothing of value at high school. Like high school level education is with the exception of reading and writing, but you learn that all by the time you're in grade 9, right? Like it's all just waste your time talking about bullshit that doesn't matter, so that we can just make sure that you're not fucking around following your own initiatives, right? It's just squander as much potential as possible and find out who's going to comply. Like that's the whole education system in a nutshell, right? And that follows through into the workforce. Who's going to comply? Because the only thing that they're testing for is obedience. It's literally the only thing they're testing for. Like they don't care if you know these things. They don't care if you actually maintain any of these facts or knowledge or any of this. They don't care about that. All they care about is when we tell you to do something, do you do it, and to what degree of success do you do it? That's what they're testing for. And the people who do the best, right? Who do what they're told the best, who obey the best, get the highest grades, right? They get to go on to the best schools, right? They get the grants and the scholarships, right? They get to go to the next tier of obedience. And what happens there? The people who obey the best continue on, right? And then you get out into the workforce, you get hired. Who gets the best pay? Who gets the best stuff? The people who obeyed the most. So it's a system based on domination and obedience, and we wonder why it's failing, right? Because the entire structure of the piece isn't, yeah, let's obey these people so that we can build a good society and live in a sustainable future. It's, oh, let's obey so that we can get as much money for psychopaths, like overt rapacious, like let's go to Jeffrey Epstein Islands and rape children psychopaths. So, and like, we should be figuring this out a lot earlier, because I'm more or less of the opinion that when people hit 14, we should just stop sending them to schools. Like, we should continue guiding them, and they should have like a guardian. But more or less, the question shouldn't be, how effectively can you do this task that I inflict upon you? The question should be, well, why are you here? What is it that you're here to pursue? What is it that you're here to figure out? What is it that you think you should be doing with your time and with your effort? What is it that you are interested in putting your effort towards in order to manifest what? In order to accomplish anything, or in order to live in what manner and in what way? These are the questions that we should be asking these kids, and they should come back, once a week, touch in with a guardian who says, okay, what have you done, and how have you focused on it, and what are you following? What are your thoughts about that? What do you think your life is for? Right? But we're not interested in that. We're not interested in what people's lives are for and what they think their life is for. Right? We're interested in dominance and control and exploiting their labor and enslaving them. That's what we're interested in. Very, very straightforwardly. Like, I don't think that this can be legitimately debated. Like, who's like the people who are standing around pretending like this system is a system of freedom are illiterate morons and like delusional schizophrenics. Like, we're obviously being dominated. It's very, very clear. Yeah, conservatives, I wish I lived in the 1800s. The 1800s, no AC, no tasty food, dirty arse, brown water, no medicine, no shower. Yeah, but you get slaves, right? So you take the good, you take the bad, right? As far as the conservative is concerned, like, can you imagine what it would have been like living as like a conservative in the Confederate South, right? Like, you never had to do any work, right? You literally just bought people to do the work for you. You could own huge parcels of land, which you could buy for basically nothing. Just plant some cotton, right? Get a bunch of people who you literally only have to pay like room and board to do all your work for you, while you like do what exactly? And this is the hard-nosed pioneering spirit that they continuously celebrate, right? And I think there's a lot of guys in America right now who look at that arrangement and think like, oh yeah, sure, like no AC, and like sure there are negatives, right? We've had technological increases, right? But we'd have lots of slaves, and that's the point. Like that's the whole point. Like, what do you think they're trying to reinstitute? Soon you'll be required to keep your views outside of society entirely. Just wait for it. Your friends will report you. Your mother will denounce you. Yeah. I mean, there's already a bit of that happening. Like, I can't talk the way that I talk here with my family, right? Like, that's not welcome, right? They're not interested. When you can tell that they're not interested, they're not in the chat, right? They don't come in the chat. And, like, and it's completely believable that we get to a point where like wait until like the PPCs start to really swell up, right? And you can see it go both ways, right? You can see it go both ways. Like there is the whole groomer narrative that's coming out of the far right in regards to the trans population, which there's no evidence of, right? It's just bullshit. Well, damn boxes, thank you so much. That's a great picture that you've picked there, dude. I really appreciate that, bud. Even $2 really helps, man. I really appreciate it. Good opportunity, guys. Like, share, subscribe. Don't donate to the Patreon. If you're donating $1, maybe make it $2. Right? Every little tiny bit helps. It really does. And God help me, I could really help it. And even more than this. If you've got a friend or a family member who is looking for a podcast or looking for a new perspective on what's going on in today's news, or just wants to ask questions or any of that kind of stuff, please let them know I exist. Please tell them. Please tell them. Thanks so much, Dan Boxes. I really appreciate that, bud. Like, it wasn't that long ago that if you were a trans person, you could not tell people about it, right? Because you would tell one person, and that person would tell somebody else, and then before you knew it, there'd be some skinhead beating the shit out of you, right? Like, these sorts of things are going to become extremely commonplace again, like extremely commonplace, with the rise of the fascist movement throughout Canada and the United States. The realization that the populace will go through that, oh, this is how we've been acting throughout the entire planet. Like, this is what we've been doing across the entire globe. And now it's home, right? It came home. So, I learned today that places like Lithuania and Georgia, their union rate is only 10%. Yeah. Like, you want to make sure that you want to make sure that there's no unions, right? Like, if you can individualize everybody, right, you can divide and conquer. I wanted to ask things like, why do most Poles have such a bad impression of the USSR? And do most Poles do, or am I only seeing the Miami Cubans as I live in North America? I mean, the history of Poland, like, it's a tough history, first of all. Like, Poland in World War II was in a really tough spot. Right, like, and you can just look at it, right? Like, there's the line of the Soviet Union, right, at that time, right? There's Germany, right? Here's poor Poland, right? Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, Poland, and very straightforwardly, Poland becomes like the neutral territory in a large-scale world war, right? And for a long period of time, like, they literally made a pact to officially call Poland a neutral zone, right? And that's all well and good to say that Poland's going to be a neutral zone, but you know that the Nazis and the Soviets were fucking around in here. Like, you know that that's what was happening, And so poor Poland is sitting there being like, boy, howdy, I wish that we could just be our own independent thing. And you can create a justification for the Soviets messing around in Poland, and you can create a justification. Well, if you're on the side of the Nazis, you're probably wrong, but it's reasonable to say that government and military forces will mess around in countries that are around them, right? Border disputes are common and expected, right? Like we should never indict people for having border disputes. Canada and the United States have border disputes. Like everybody has border disputes. But when you're getting into the heightened moment of World War II and the insanity of all of that, yeah. And I mean, here in North America, we hear the most about the anti-Soviet side of it because who are the people who escaped from Poland and fled here to North America? Fascists, right? Like the fascists lost the war, and they fled. They couldn't flee into Russia, right? They couldn't really flee into Allied territory, right? So where'd they go? Right? So we hear a lot about them because of that. And that's a concept that liberals don't really think about. Like your liberal NDPer types, they don't really realize that like the narratives that we hear about the conflicts between the Soviet Union and Europe and all of this are coming from the fascists who fled. Like you just ask these people like, oh hey, so your grandpa said this. Well, who did your grandpa work for during that period of time? And it usually ends up that they're a Nazi, right? Or at least a collaborator. Yeah, they still do it now, slave labor. You bet, Lonnie. You bet. David Graeber actually made the argument, if you look at any places in the world throughout history where they had a lot of capitalism before the establishment of the capitalist order, there's always a link to a strong slavery market, of course. Like, the beating heart of capitalism is you do all the work while I do nothing. Like, that's capitalism to a T. That's, if all parties are working, and if all parties are benefiting from the value of their labor, then it's not capitalism, right? That capitalism, like the heart of capitalism, is that I withhold food and shelter from you unless you do all the work for me while I do nothing important whatsoever. That's capitalism. Polish socialists lost support because of repressions. This is coming from Marx. Out of fear of color revolutions and fascist uprisings, economic issues, intense nationalism, the belief of a lack of freedom. Yeah. Poland had been partitioned 7 or so times in the past, and they felt they were the victims, sort of like Ukrainian nationalism and anti-communism. Yeah. I'm always glad when you're in the chat, Mock. You always have really good shit to add to the conversation. It's really useful, for sure. I am an Abraham Lincoln and Union fan, but not all Confederates had slaves. Only a few did who were rich, and the elite had. Most Confederate soldiers had no idea they were fighting for slavery. I don't think that's true at all, dude. Like, I really don't think that that's true at all. Like, it's like pretty hard to believe that's the case. Like, slavery was an institution. The southern states were essentially structured like a feudal society, more or less. The Confederates were outright reading. Like, I actually have a book called Cotton is King. I highly advise everybody go see this and go read this book, Cotton is King, where the pro-slavery, like during the lead up to the Civil War, one of the critiques that the anti-slavery movement, I'm forgetting the name of it all of a sudden, that's hilarious, that the anti-slavery movement levied on the southern slavers was, you guys are not actually trying to justify your position. And so in response, the southern slavers attempted to do so, right? And they wrote many tracts and many economic articles and many sorts of things, which has been put into a collection called Cotton is King, where they argue in favor of slavery. And there are all kinds of arguments, and like your basic racism, like black people are just straight up inferior. Your religious arguments that God has given supremacy to white people. Your straight up just economic arguments of like, look how much money we're making, right? Like, forget about the sovereignty of the individual or any of that kind of stuff, right? Just look how much money we're making. And one of I think one of their most interesting arguments was pointing out that wage slavery, which is the idea that you rent yourself to somebody, is actually a more coercive and eviler system, right? It's very, 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 very unlikely to me that the Confederate soldiers would not understand that what was at stake was the legacy of slavery. Like, slavery was tied into the political life and the political fabric of America during that period of time. Like, as they were conquering this territory, right, there was a north-south divide, because the Northerners were not using slavery. They were creating a society that was actually using the democratic system, or using democratic systems, whereas the South was far more feudal and explicitly using slave markets and explicitly doing so. And while both sides were conquering territory, there were constant debates as to whether or not to allow certain territories into the Union, because they didn't want to. So both sides were disincentivized to allow a state in for reasons that were always tied in to slavery. So if you had, like, Iowa was anti-slavery and they didn't want slaves in, well, the South didn't want them in the Union. And so you have all kinds of conversations constantly where, like, Iowa comes into the Union at the same time as Missouri because Iowa is against slavery and Missouri is for slavery, right? And that's constantly happening all of the time. It's extremely unbelievable. Like, I would be very, very surprised to find out that a significant amount of Confederate soldiers did not understand that what this war was about was tied in to slavery. Like, the President of the United States was talking about it. Every single governor was constantly talking about it. It's an unbelievable and untenable position for me to believe that people did not understand what they were fighting over. That, like, but again, the argument of the Southerners was that slavery was a superior system to the Northern system. That and this in my view is actually the most persuasive argument that comes out of the Southern slavers, which is that, look, we at least have to take care of our slaves, right? We have them, and when there's no work to do, we feed them and we clothe them, and we have to take care of them. You Northerners, well, you've got your workers, right, or your indentured servants or whatever, who you pay a wage to, and when the work dries up, you kick them out and tell them to fend for themselves. And in fact, there's many cases post-Civil War of exactly this happening to freed slaves, where slaves would be freed and then they would enter a wage slave system. They would be abandoned, and they would return back to their masters and beg to go back into chattel slavery. It did happen, right? And so the fight between the North and the South on the lead up to the Civil War, it was understood what the stakes were by all parties. And I don't think we should pretend otherwise. The Southerners believed that chattel slavery was a superior moral system and more effective than wage slavery, which, incidentally, Lincoln ran on a platform of also abolishing wage slavery. But after the Civil War, was never able to do it because, fucking Civil War destroyed the country. It's pretty unbelievable for me to think that anybody involved in that conflict would not understand that they were fighting on principles of slavery. It's pretty. Yeah, I wish David Graeber was still around. Poland had been partitioned. Oh, I already read that. I always love reading the chat. You guys are always smart and funny and interesting. And like honestly, it just feels like the news is the same shit over and over again, you know? Like it's the same although this British rail strike is actually quite interesting. There's a fellow who is coming out of it, a trade unionist coming out of it, who's very powerful. I forget his name offhand, but it's like Mick something. He's all over TikTok right now. He's all over the place because he's basically shutting down these idiots, these like total sycophants, and making the British media look stupid. I think that's the big thing. Like he's literally talking the way that I talk to the British media, and they have to talk to him because he's the leader. That literally just happened. A U.S. senator said Uvalde Killer was trans, and next day a group of men assaulted a random trans person. Yep, it's always happening, for sure. And it's going to get worse, and it's going to get more explicit. For sure. Same here. He was the one who really made me realize we need to pay attention to anthropology work. Yeah. Mandela effect moment here. I don't remember the world map looking like that. Well, how often do you actually look at the world map, first of all? Right? How often do you actually look at it? So, the mind plays tricks. The mind plays tricks. Honestly, though, imagine being surrounded by fascists and communists and trying to be some passive liberal country. Yeah, come on. Exactly, Colin. Good to see you. Also, Poland had very little industry, and most people were peasants, not proles. That added to the destruction of World War II. The population shrank from 35 million to 24 million. That's a huge reduction. That's a huge, huge reduction, eh? Like 35 to 24, that's a third. Like that's a third. That's huge. It's an enormous amount. And then what are they at now? Population of Poland. Right? Like, so they're basically just now getting through. So like, when did they actually get back to like, so it wasn't until like the 80s that they even got back in terms of population. Like that's look at the population decline that's happening in Ukraine right now. I don't know why they're showing me Ukraine, but there it is. Like 1990, which is, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union. So people start leaving Ukraine because of the fall of the Soviet Union. And down we go. Down we go. I really like that Debt the First 5,000 Years. Bullshit Jobs is a really good one. Bullshit Jobs is probably his best work. Debt the First 5,000 Years is interesting, but Bullshit Jobs is his best work for sure. I guess Poland's case is more unique. I see a lot of these Eastern Euro countries having the same anti-Russian, anti-USSR. I think you would be surprised. Like, there's very, very recent polling is coming out of the countries that are in the former Soviet bloc, and a lot of them are saying like things were better. Like things were better. Like you have places like Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, I think is right. Like this block right here, and of course, I mean Ukraine is going through its own situation at the moment. So, but these countries here are more or less of the opinion that things were better under the Soviet Union. Yeah, I just want to see how much of that is actually justified, not some Nazi shit. Yeah. I finished reading the chapter 2 about trade. The thing I don't get is how can you have a credit system without money? Yeah. He makes the argument that economies develop with credit, money, and then trade. Well, what is credit? Hey, enemy, how you doing? What is credit? Right? Like, credit is literally, you owe me one. That's all credit is. Right? Credit is not a it's not complicated, right? That if you do something for me and you say you owe me one and I go you got it, well, I owe you one, right? You've credited me something. And this is how like most of it worked for the longest time. And that for the most part, it was never really written down, right? But then people started writing it down. And there's actually a fairly credible argument that writing comes from this, that this is the beginning of writing. That literally, like, you draw, you make a mark for this person's name, and he goes, yeah, that's my name. And then you put a chicken down. And that means he owes you a chicken, right? For whatever reason that's agreed upon or enforced, that's not a monetary exchange. That's a system of credit, right? And it's not barter, because it's more ephemeral than that, right? That I think David Graeber's biggest contribution to economics and our economic understanding of economic history is that there really never was such a thing as a barter system. Like, there really wasn't, like, I have a bushel of eggs and I need shoes, but the shoe man doesn't want my eggs, so we're going to create a common currency, right? Like, far more common was, I need shoes. And the shoe guy goes, well, here's some shoes, you owe me one. And your name, I gave you those shoes, you owe me one. And you go, great, thank you for the shoes, I owe you one, I'll get back to you, let me know, right? And like, that's, and if you've got a smaller community where everybody kind of knows one another, system of credit is fine, right? And of course then, like, if I went back to the shoe guy and was like, hey, can I get another pair of shoes? The guy would probably be like, no, you already owe me one, right? Or maybe he would be like, okay, but like, you owe me two now, right? It's like a bar tab, right? Systems of credit, very, very common. Money comes later. Money comes later. That money arises from states. That, like, you think about it like a king or a chieftain arises in a country, and he needs to get an army together. Well, how do you do this, right? Do you persuade them through love of country or whatever? Well, no. An effective way of doing it is to promise riches. And so what are some riches that you can promise? Well, you can promise them a military-enforced object that everyone is supposed to accept in exchange for goods and services. Money, right? That money doesn't arise in like a decentralized sort of sense. Like the whole crypto boy thing is very stupid. The more you think about it, the more you look at it. The idea that there even can be such a thing as a decentralized currency. It doesn't make sense on the face of it. Money has always been enforced with the power of the state through military force. Always. 100% of the time. Right? There's no such thing as like... Because if you actually get a society that is actually saying to itself, we should have a decentralized currency that everyone... Well, then you're just going to do a system of credit, aren't you? Hey, can I get these shoes? Sure, you owe me one. Okay. Right? That's way easier. You don't need some decentralized currency. You don't need some kind of thing like that. You know, like, and if you are going to have a decentralized currency, why not just have systems of credit? You owe me one. Okay. Credit money. He makes the argument that economies develop with credit money and then trade. Like, and he's talking about international trade, right? Like Romania trading with Ukraine, right? Because that actually requires pretty large systems, right? It's really difficult to take like 10,000 bushels of grain from Romania and send them over to Ukraine, right? Like you need a ton of infrastructure to do that. And who's actually organizing it, and how is that actually done, and what currency exchange even exists for such things, and usually there's no monetary exchange. Again, it's typically done through systems of credit. Like you've heard of a trade deficit, right? Like we have a trade deficit, or let's get away from here. Let's say France has a trade deficit with Spain. Right? That well, all that means is that France has been taking more grain, let's say, than Spain has been getting back bananas, just like random commodities. That it doesn't make sense, but that's what it is. And the value of the bananas that France has been given isn't equal to the amount of grain that Spain has been giving France. So that creates between them a trade deficit, right? And this gives Spain sort of the ability to say to France, hey, you've got a trade deficit with us. You owe us one. Can you pay that off through blah, 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 blah. And it just ends up being like a negotiating chip. And throughout history, trade deficits can be eliminated for all sorts of reasons, right? Like Spain says to France, you've got a pretty big trade deficit with us. We are at war with Algeria. Can you send some troops down to fight the Algerians with us, the Spaniards, here? And the French go, and that'll eliminate the trade deficit. And the Spanish go, yes, it will. And France goes, perfect. And they send it over. Like, an amazing amount of economics truly is, okay, I'll give you this, but you owe me one. And it's not actually difficult to understand that concept, right? Like, I keep saying it over and over and over again about economics. The field of economics has been made difficult to understand. It's been made difficult on purpose by people who benefit from the idea that it's a difficult subject to understand when it isn't. It's not a difficult subject to understand. It's actually a lot simpler than people think, because if people actually understood how simple the subject was, they would understand that these people are frauds. And it would be pretty quick. Like, I remember for the longest time, like the big argument that always gets put, which I've come to understand, it's the same argument that people who defend Jordan Peterson use, right? Oh, it's just so complex you don't understand it, right? And that puts you on your back foot if you take it seriously, right? It's a form of gaslighting that, like, you're standing there saying, this sounds like bullshit, this sounds like fraudulent nonsense, and they say, no, you don't understand it. The problem is you, that it's very complex and you're just not understanding it, right? And instead of saying, no, this is fraudulent bullshit, it's obvious, a baby can see it, you get put on the back foot and you start to think, oh, maybe I don't understand. And so what do? You dig deeper into it, right? You research more and you keep digging and you keep digging and you keep digging. This is what I did with economics, right? You dig and 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 you dig, and you come up and you say, these guys are frauds. They say, no, you're just not understanding it. And so you go, and then you dig and you dig and you dig and you dig and you dig, and then you come back and you say, no, these guys are frauds. And they are frauds. Like, every neoliberal from every neoliberal institution is fraudulent, just like their institutions. Like, they've discredited themselves. And the major way they've discredited themselves is that they've taken a system or a series of ideas that are at base quite simple to understand and articulate, and they've made them complex on purpose in order to obfuscate and confuse the populace. Like, and there's a reason why these systems are falling apart, why the systems that these neoliberals have put together are falling apart, because they've trained a bunch of people who actually think that what they're talking about is real when it isn't. They've bought into the bullshit. That it's to them it's not a grift. They think that it's real. And so of course it's falling apart. Like, of course it's falling apart. Yeah, I've got literally no respect for American economics, like the economics profession. I have like zero respect for it. And you can see it when you go in and like just go in to like an economics subreddit where these guys are all talking about this kind of stuff. They're speaking they're speaking a different language, right? And when you actually look at what they're saying to one another, it's babble that they all kind of agree on loose sort of terms about what is or is not actually happening, and no one can actually agree on anything because nobody actually understands that what they're talking about is babble. It's just fucking nonsense at this stage in the game. And the system they defend is just in this free fall collapse, and we're supposed to still take these guys seriously. So how can economy... I keep thinking credit like our current system where we get money and we have to pay it back. Yeah, I think I talked about that. Only 6 million ethnic Poles were killed during the war, but 3 of the 6 million Jews who died during the Holocaust were from Poland. Oh, Poland had the highest death rate for Jews at 90%. Shit. Yeah, there's also a lot of ammonia in Poland, yeah. You are the best, John. Well, Mystic, thanks so much. I appreciate that, bud. I do appreciate that. I worry that I alienate people. Yesterday, I felt like I alienated some people. And I'm just like... It's exhausting talking to these people sometimes, though. Honestly, it is. It's exhausting. Like, especially right now, I'm dealing with stupid eye shit. Like, no, I'm not going to give the NDP credit for passing dental care. Like, sorry, we threw a dinghy at a drowning man in a fucking tsunami and called it a day. Like, yeah. I guess I took it as bartering, though credit based on bartering is a bit odd. Well, the conception of bartering is that, like, I have eggs, you have shoes, we have to do like a 1-to-1 trade. It just never existed. Like, there's just not really evidence that such a system actually existed. Like, and the more you think about it, like, it makes sense that we detached from more ancient systems and small communal kind of economies would misunderstand how they would go about things. But really, the more you think about it, the more you realize that, yeah, bartering doesn't make sense. A barter system is so very clearly something that you just create in your imagined space. And of course, if you're like a hard-nosed capitalist, sociopathic, economist, you gotta exist in this space where everyone's mistrustful of one another. There's betrayal around every corner. There's no such thing as community. Everyone's self-interested and selfish. No one's willing to say, yeah, just take these shoes and get back to me. Like, no one's willing to do that. And so if you already exclude from your pattern of thinking the way people were for thousands and thousands of years, then you've got to create a different narrative of how it must have been. And so the barter system arises, right? And then you logically think, oh yeah, well, that's an inefficient system, because it is, right? Like, so this is the justification for how money arose in the minds of these guys, right? Is that, well, obviously money arises because barter is inefficient, and it's better to have a common currency, right? Well, so what have they done? So they've excluded what was actually going on because mistrust is built into their mode of thinking and into their pattern of thinking, right? It can't simply be that somebody gave someone an item and said, get back to me, which is exactly what was happening, right? It can't be that they just simply wrote it down. We're just like, oh, I gave you some shoes, get back to me, right? That can't be it. So they excluded the actual fact of what was happening in the first place, created an alternative reality, right? Which is inefficient and bad. And so they justified the defeat of that inferior system with a system that they're currently using. So they're like self-justifying their own system by creating a false system that never existed in the first place. Modern economics, eh? It's a beautiful thing. Mexican president offering Assange asylum. Interesting wrinkle. Interesting wrinkle. That is an interesting wrinkle, actually. I feel like Mexico is basically just flipping the U.S. off this whole time. Like when the Ukraine war started, Mexico was basically just like, we're going to keep trading with Russia. Like, we're not going to stop. And now offering Assange asylum. That's an interesting wrinkle in the Julian Assange path. I hope that guy ends up in some villa. Wouldn't that be a nice end for him, right? If he ended up over in Puebla, right? He just ends up in like a little Mexican town or city somewhere, right? Like ends up in like Guerrero, like chill chingo, just chilling out in like a villa somewhere, drinking mojitos, still communicating with the world through digital stuff, still doing WikiLeaks or anything, but just chilling out in Mexico. I hope that's what happens. I really do. Julian Assange is one of the great heroes of our generation, and it's evil what has happened to him. Like, and the United States, like, trying to extradite him to the United States, I'm literally like, he's not even a fucking American citizen. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Poland had tankies in World War II, for sure. Good to see a major. Ledger, blockchain check is Ledger. The only difference is government will control the centralized one. Decentralized, everyone can see what's going on. You're way off on all the crypto stuff. I mean, no, crypto is, there's a reason it's collapsing. It's just a Ponzi scheme. It's not based on anything real. It's not based on anything tangible. It literally is. If you attempt to make the argument that such a thing will be decentralized, well then the people who create the centralized government of it, or the centralized power structure, are the people who own the most, and the people who own the most are going to be the billionaire class. So all you're doing is creating a currency that is controlled by a billionaire class that doesn't respond to government. It's a terrible idea. Like, it's a terrible idea to have crypto. Like, can you imagine if crypto actually became powerful enough and everybody moved over to crypto? You're basically saying to the billionaire class, also own the money. Like, no. Like, no, thank you. Like, no, thank you. Yeah, blockchain isn't controlled by the government. Anyone can be a part of the blockchain technically, but we know who's going to control it. Like, it's going to be the billionaire class. It's going to be the people who have the most amount of capital. Like, that's the reason why it doesn't work. And so you're creating a system that basically sidesteps the Federal Reserve, the United States government, any kind of democratic interaction that any citizen could actually have theoretically with their own money supply, and you're essentially saying to the billionaire class, you own it. It's a bad idea from the outset. The one that will replace our current money will be a centralized blockchain tech. It won't be Bitcoin everyone uses. It'll be some big bank BS coin, probably specific to a country. And honestly, like, outside of any of this kind of conversation, I think digital currencies are a disaster from the outset. Like, why are we spending physical, tangible resources in order to have a invisible fake currency that that doesn't actually achieve anything much past what we already have? Like, I'm yet to hear a cohesive or cogent argument for why this is better. Like, it really does seem to me like I'm being told that we should all go back to VHS because VHS has this, that, and the other feature in it. And I'm just like, why? Like, we already have something that is superior and works better. I feel like crypto is just novelty at this point. It's just a novelty thing. It's just literally all of us monkeys going, look at what I can do. Right? Oh, look at what we can do. Look at what we can do. Oh, look at what we can do. Well, should we? I don't think so. I think crypto is a bad idea. Not just from like an ethical, moral, and power kind of based issue, but from a technological issue. I think it's a bad idea. Like, we're literally burning the same amount of fossil fuels as the country of Argentina in order to have this currency that's decentralized so that governments can't be involved in it, which more and more I talk about it, the more I'm just like, oh, isn't this just like the libertarian billionaire wet dream of I can have all my riches and they won't be taxed ever? Like, I can literally just dominate and control markets freely, and everybody can see me do it, right? Like that, okay. Like, you can watch me dominate and control the entire planet's resources through a currency that no government can interact with. Like, I'm not keen on this. Like, I'm not keen on this idea at all, in fact. Like, it just seems like a secession of even financial authority to the class of psychopaths who are actively attempting to destroy the planet in the first place. And again, I'm just like, I don't, like, who gives a shit about, like, I don't get why we're all supposed to be, like, shooting our guns in the air, screaming Yahoo because this technology exists. That seems to me to only be a sink for fossil fuels. Like, let's burn more coal so Bitcoin can be here. Like, I don't understand. I'm perfectly fine with a centralized system if I trust those that run it. I don't. Decentralized makes more sense in this corrupt environment to me. If the environment is corrupt, then the corrupt people will own the decentralized currency. Like, a currency is always controlled by the people who have the most of it. That's just the truth. That if there's $1,000 and I own $900 of it, I own the currency. You can have your $100, like the rest of you can have that or whatever, and like do your little interactions or all that kind of stuff. But if I want something significant to happen with that currency, I own most of it. I own it. It's going to happen, right? And that is what these currencies are going to be, right? Which is why people are losing faith in them, because they really are starting to see that, like, first of all, these currencies aren't solving a problem, right? That, like, the novelty of it, we all got caught up in the novelty of it, like Pogs, right? Like whatever fad was coming through, we're all just like, oh, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, look at what we can do. Oh, it's interesting. So everybody got, like, really fascinated by it. But then very quickly you realize it doesn't solve a problem, right? Like, it doesn't solve a problem at all. And the primary beneficiaries are the people who own the market. And the people who own the market are the billionaire class, who are trying to do everything they can to separate themselves from any institutional power whatsoever. It's just a bad idea overall. And extra bad in a corrupt environment. Extra bad in a corrupted environment. Because in a corrupted environment, this is the tool that will be used to take taxpayer money and funnel it into this bullshit so they can just get more power and literally just burn more energy and more power for fuck all. For fuck all. It's not helping you. It's certainly not helping anybody, right? It's the only reason that this technology exists at all is so that the billionaire class can continue their process of extraction and abandonment. It's the only reason it exists. Yeah, even Pure Polio has admitted that the neoliberal economics is a farce, but he'll twist it. Pure Polio? Who's Pure Polio? Is that Polyev? Is that who you're talking about? That's funny, dude. Centralized only works if the people in power had our best interests at heart. Like, look, at the very least, right, theoretically, a centralized money supply controlled by a government can be interacted with by the populace, right? Now, of course, the entire system has been co-opted by the same billionaire class that's trying to create this crypto market in the first place, right? And so we obviously are skeptical of our government systems, and we're obviously skeptical of them for that reason. But the solution is ultimately, like, not to join the billionaires in the decentralization of the currency, but to extract the billionaires from the system. And the only way we're going to do that, surround the halls of power. What happened yesterday? Wednesday. Wednesday happened yesterday. Well, okay, I'm going to finish, hold on. You have a point. Unless you have the resources, you can't really compete with people who have the resources to mine crypto. We are going to transition to a digital currency very soon. It will happen. Your argument seems to avoid this fact. I mean, just because we're going to do it doesn't make it a good idea. Just straight up. Like, it's a bad idea. We shouldn't do it. It's a bad technology. It doesn't solve anybody's problems. It burns a lot of fossil fuels and a lot of energy in order to be done. And at the end of the day, the only true beneficiary will be the death cult. Like, it doesn't help anybody. It's not a better way to live. It's not a better way to exist. We're just tying more and more people to a fake system that doesn't do anything. And just because we're doing it doesn't mean it's good. Social credit system, I mean, is it a social credit system? That's an interesting thing. I haven't thought about it enough. I wish I'd have invested in crypto so I wouldn't have to work anymore, but even if I was on the fence whether or not to do it, I knew it was bad. I think both things can be true at the same time, what you're saying and what John is saying. No, you're not going to convince me. Like, it's like, what, can you tell me one thing that crypto actually does? Like, what is the problem that crypto solves? Right? Like, this is the constant thing that I constantly look at the crypto market. I'm just like, what problem is this solving? Near as I can tell, it's just another casino. And an even more ridiculous one, because it's literally nothing. Like, instead of being tied to like a military force of some kind or anything, like instead of being tied to state power, instead of being tied to legislative authority or anything, right? It's literally, it exists just because people want it to. Like, it's quite literally nothing. I don't necessarily think crypto is better, but rather a thing that is growing, becoming more popular. Yeah. Yeah, NFTs are the worst thing. Yeah. Like, NFTs are basically nonsense. Crypto seems cool because it's temporarily made a handful of millionaires escape the conditions of having to work. It can generate a millionaire in like 5 minutes. Yeah, it's a casino. Things like expansion packs in games or game currencies, pogs, slammers, non-fungible tokens. There is zero difference between crypto markets and the stock market, Wall Street. It's the same system, same grift, same wealth extraction. It doesn't matter. That's not actually true, right? Like, crypto markets are nothing. They're just literally numbers, right? The stock market actually does interact with a real economy. It does actually build things, right? Like, when you're buying the stock of a company, you're giving capital to a company so that they can use it to build something, at least theoretically, right? That's not happening so much anymore because more and more and more of the economy is becoming financialized, which is to say that it's worthless. Right, you're taking real assets and just funneling them into NFTs, crypto markets, just illusionary bullshit. Who cares? Like, or just like these fanciful pursuits, these vanity projects by billionaires. Right? Elon Musk needs another $200 billion to get to Mars. Like, this kind of like non-existent fake bullshit that's actually siphoning away the real market. But at least the stock market is in a way interacting with that, right? Crypto's not. Like, crypto just exists in the imagined space of the billionaire class. Crypto became popular first to talk about people buying illegal things with them. Yeah, or trading Magic the Gathering cards. That was one of the big ones. I'm not suggesting it's an answer. I'm posting people see it as an escape in regards. Arguments like that have no weight. Illegal people find ways around systems. If it wasn't crypto, it'd be something else. Yeah. Like, yeah, I agree with you on that, Methane. I don't like the idea that, like, you're right. Like, if people want to do things illegitimately and pursue crime, they're going to do that. And that's irregardless of the system. And so the system must be critiqued on its own merits. It solves cats. My cat just jumped on my lap. I had to make a silly argument. Fantastic. In a future digital currency world where our corrupt government can turn off our money, it's an escape from that. A way to build wealth, a possibility. But okay, so Methane, like, because again, you keep saying the same kind of thing again and again, which is that there's a corrupt government, right? The government is corrupt and they'll shut off our money, right? Corrupt government. Well, who's corrupted the government, right? If there's a corrupt government, it's because the billionaire class has corrupted that government, right? That there's no separation there, as is often the case in our kind of mental space, that the government is corrupted by the very people who are going to own the crypto market. And the reason why this corrupt class is going to corrupt the government and then shut down your money supply is to force people into digital markets and into crypto after shutting down their money supply, and then convincing them that this was always the problem, the government was always the problem, so that the people will never actually recognize, oh, this was the institution that actually has legislative authority. We can cast these guys off of us, seize back our currency, and tell these guys to fuck off completely. And as long as we continue buying into the idea that this arrangement never happens, and that the problem is government, always, that this is the problem, not this is the problem, well, specifically, this is the problem, then these guys are always going to corrupt it, convince us that this is the problem, and force us into digital markets that they own. That's the crypto path. And again, like, it's not solving a problem, right? It's just a method to force the populace into, like, a feudal system, where instead of the corporate power structure needing to negotiate with government in order to get monetary, like, the corporations have to go to the government and be like, bail us out, and the government has to go, okay, right? And that's your corruption right there. But it's possible that one day the corporation will go like, bail us out, and the government will go, fuck off. That's possible. And so what are the corporations trying to do? They're trying to get rid of that possibility. And they're trying to sidestep it. What's a good way to do that? Just completely destroy it. Completely destroy it. Get rid of it, delegitimize it, be done with it, and leave them as the only prevailing power structure. That's what crypto is doing. Yeah, there's this side of it as well, right? Content. So, and I don't know if methane is saying that it's inherently and inescapably corrupt. But if that is the case, why in God's name should I trust some radical crypto boys of being corruption free? Yeah. Corruption didn't make it easier for crime to flourish. Not what I'm saying. Just as one of the ways it became popular. You're right. Theoretically, blockchain crypto can solve this problem. How it's implemented now, it does not work. I think recognizing the crime aspect is more important. Yeah. Oh boy, someone please shut off the water and electricity. Honestly, though, fiat is way better for illegal things, as every transaction is recorded forever with cryptocurrency. We're never going to solve this one. And there'll be disagreements on it until the end of time, honestly. Okay. Let's do the number draw, guys. There's 11 of you watching right now. I expect to see 11 numbers. I'm in on a 7 with Mocked. Ride or die, Mocked. Ride or die.
Number. It's June
Lonnie's in with a 5.
2022.
We got an 8.
10 balls.
Ligandy's, he knows how this works. Methane, you're doubling in with a 7. Another 7. Oh my God, we're ride or dying on 7s. I hope it's a 7. I hope it. Now's the time. It doesn't feel like a 7 day. It doesn't feel like a 7 day. I gotta tell you, we've been missing this 7 the whole time. Here we go. Today's number is. Oh, sorry, Adam.
3.
3. We did it. 3. Well, we all know that 3 is half of 8, right? So we'll give it to Ligandy's today. Why not? Tons of 7s in the chat today. Not a single 3, though. Womp, womp, womp. Everybody picked a 7 today. That's hilarious. Womp, womp, womp. All right, let's get off this crypto thing. Echo starts with a backwards 3. We already talked about this shit. Oh yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene tells UK reporter, go back to your country. So, the reason why I wanted to point this out, is to point out how radically nationalist the GOP is becoming. That typically the phrase "go back to your country" is a more white supremacist thing. It's more for a white person telling a person of color to go back to their country, even if they're born in the country. But now, here are members of the GOP using this phrase against even traditional allies, traditional white nations, right? Like, that is a virulent form of nationalism that's taking hold in the GOP, right? That it's going to be described as isolationist. It's going to be pretty extreme in how much it separates itself from the rest of the world. And it's statements like this that make me believe Donald Trump and the GOP when they say things like, we should get out of NATO. We should do away with NATO. That's actually something that, when I first heard it, I thought, that's kind of just Donald Trump doing Donald Trump shit, right? Just stirring the pot, being a douche nozzle because he wants to be a douche nozzle. But this idea seems to be taking hold in the GOP. And this raises a really interesting question to me, which is getting rid of NATO actually good? Is getting rid of NATO actually good or bad? Right? And it's one of these leftist conundrums, because we are anti-imperialist. We should be against formations of empire. NATO is, without a doubt, an imperial power. But is it preferable to have a NATO structure or to simply do away with it? I'm of two minds. What are you guys saying? Yeah, MTG is just crazy. No, of course she's crazy. But like Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, like there's tons of nut jobs now and more and more, by election, more and more getting into the game, right? It's that to me is what's going to make this next Republican swing, even if it is somebody like DeSantis, right? Even if it is someone like DeSantis, because when Trump first got in, he didn't have any allies, and actually sought to alienate a lot of allies. And this attracted a new breed into the GOP. And now Trump will have allies, right? Or the leader will have allies. And their allies are going to be these whack jobs, right? These complete nuts. That's what makes this next iteration so much more dangerous, in my view. Because it's one thing to have just like a malevolent force like Trump operating in the government as like a cudgel, being the person that he is. And it's quite another for him to have a whole slew of toadies who will listen to what he says and vote along the lines he wants them to vote along. That's a whole other ball of wax. It looks to me that under Trump, they're moving more towards mercantilism policies. That makes sense, right? It makes sense that they would want to be more mercantile because they are merchants. That's who they are. They don't really want, like, in all alliances with America are alliances of convenience, right? And that's what's going to make it very unstable and difficult to want to do business with. Because if all alliances are alliances of convenience, then you can never really trust them. And so more and more people are going to turn towards more and more stable. Like, the biggest reason why China looks so good to big sections of the world population is that when China says it's going to do something, it does it, right? Like, that seems very appealing to lots of people. Whereas in North America, these politicians say one thing and do another all the time, right? And you can't do business with people on those lines. Like, forget about the moral and the ethical catastrophes that the United States is creating. Just straight up, even if you're like a rugged, hard-nosed, like capitalist-minded, business-minded individual, you can't do business with these people. You don't know what they're going to do. They're unpredictable. Insert stolen Michael Parenti joke saying you can't eat pizza anymore because pizza is an Italian word and you have to call it tomato pie now. I don't know if I get it, but I like it anyway. So no NATO, right? Let's get rid of NATO. So every single European nation drops out of NATO and becomes its sort of own thing once again. That all of these are sort of independent states once more. Right? They have their sort of trade agreements, but all of the military agreements that had previously existed are done away with, and the each individual state then begins the process of renegotiating or rediscovering who actually wants to be in some kind of military arrangement or military alliance or military agreement without the presence of the United States, right? And it's, in my view, it's actually most likely that if the United States were to withdraw, that NATO would attempt to just become a European sort of arrangement. The most negative argument I have heard that I take seriously comes from John Mershimer, who said, he had a very realistic perspective, and he said, it's better to have NATO than to not have NATO because of Europe's history of internal war. That pre-World War I and World War II and pre-NATO, it's not like Europe was a bastion of peace. That if you actually look at who was doing the most war on the planet, you're looking at Europe. For sure, you're looking at Europe. And that NATO exists as a glue, as a force that keeps these countries from going to war with each other, at the very least. And is there a negative? Yeah, of course there's a negative. That instead of doing war with each other, they go to like Libya and blow the shit out of it, right? So really, like when it comes to this question, it's what would you prefer to see? Do you want to see Europe fall into an internal turmoil? Or are you willing to sort of accept that every so often NATO is going to do some crazy shit? That seems to me to be what's going on with that. But on the other side of it, maybe we should be doing away with NATO. Maybe it would be better if Europe attempts to solve its own problems internally, rather than bullying up and striking out. I bring this up because I'm curious about what you guys think about this. Sorry, Ligandies. Is something else going on? I think Barry is trying to assert himself. That's all. Barry is the leader of Socialist Action. He's the federal secretary. He's very knowledgeable. I think that he's just trying to assert some thoughts and get into the conversation. I kind of worry that you guys are just talking past each other. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to spend too much time dealing with internal politics, but I just feel like there's yeah. That's all. Just keep engaging. That's what I'll say. Keep engaging. Barry is very knowledgeable. He's very passionate, without a doubt. He's very passionate. He shows up. He shows up to events and all that kind of stuff. I think just assume positive intent with him, because I don't think he's trying to be divisive so much. I think he's just got passion under his belly. That's all. And a good opportunity to say, if you guys are looking for people in your area to organize with, Socialist Action is a great tool. There are lots of people that get connected to that organization. There are lots of people all over the place. It might surprise you. It might surprise you. So give it a whirl. Give it a go. Yeah. Also, like, share, subscribe, guys. Like, share, subscribe. No, this is not something. This is one that I showed yesterday, but I think I'm going to actually read today. Canadian corporate profits are soaring, while inflation is eating into workers' wages. It's by David MacDonald from The Jacobin. Labor hardship and a fattened corporate sector underlie Canada's pandemic recovery. Workers are suffering, while corporate profits are capturing more economic growth than in any previous recession recovery period over the last 50 years. Over the past 50 years, Canada has experienced 6 recessions. Capitalism really working out, right? In the 1974, 1990, and 2008 recessions, workers ended up better off than corporations, whereas in the 1981 and 2020 recessions, corporations had the upper hand. This time around, the corporate profit to GDP ratio is higher than any recovery in the past century. In the final months of 2019, corporate profits captured 12.4% of GDP. By the first quarter of 2022, corporate profits had risen to 15.2% of GDP. This unprecedented 2.8-point increase. I feel like I already read this one, actually. Yeah, I did. Oh, good. Ben Jorgensen coming in with a strong response. I'm glad. There is no credible communist argument in favor of NATO. Well, especially because NATO was created as a way to dismantle the Soviet Union. 1 second, guys. Sorry. Milo, calm down, buddy. Calm down, okay? Got this little pug. He's just like screaming at me right now. I'm like, dude, calm down. Here. Yeah, it seems to me like, don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here trying to say that, like, NATO, let's go, rah, rah, rah. Like, I'm not like Zizek or something, right? Saying that, like, the only leftist perspective can be a full embracing of NATO, right? No. I'm not like that. And to me, it's more of a thought experience. NATO has got to go, fantastic. I strongly believe that NATO needs to be abolished for the sake of world peace. Sure, Europe has had a history of bloodshed. However, in order to get things better, it's got to get worse first. If the goal is to dismantle the system of capital, then NATO needs to be a first step in order to do that. On top of that, NATO is also used as a way to establish the neoliberal order, yeah. Well, I mean, it is actually somewhat difficult for me to believe that the system of capital can be overturned or overthrown without Europe falling into some kind of internal war. You know? Like, I completely see what you're saying, that the system of capital is maintained by NATO. NATO is an organization that exists in order to establish the neoliberal order or maintain liberal democracies, right, throughout the globe, and spread its to me, it's the spreading, right? Like, if NATO existed as a defensive military alliance, and that's what they did, and their whole ethos was just like, yeah, we're a bloc, we've like broed down, we're NATO, we're doing our shit in our nations, and that's great. But it's when they start talking about, like, we need to spread liberal democracy around the planet, right? The way that Bush did, right? Bush was all about that. We're going to spread liberal democracy. That's basically just like a perpetual, never-ending war of total devastation and death across the planet all the way. And so it is one of these things where I'm like, as the populaces begin to fight back against capitalism, and as there are more, as there's more saber rattling from below, it just does seem like and frankly, even if they do maintain NATO as a system, will Europe be able to hold off from some kind of internal conflict in the first place, right? Yeah, Milo demands attention. Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like the chat is like 2 minutes behind, 3 minutes behind. Here, somebody put into the chat the number 1 right now. See how long it takes until somebody puts the number 1 in chat. I want to see how big the delay is. Because if Anime is responding to me helping the pug out just now, that's a pretty big delay. That's a pretty big delay, which is unfortunate. Peanut butter. Yeah. Oh, Lonnie. Yeah, that was only like 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds. So, Lonnie, you're here. Okay. Ben Jorgensen. I love your name, bud. Ben Jorgensen. That's a strong name. That's a strong name, bud. I like it. But NATO is tied to a system of capital, and capital cannot just sit still, but it has to spread across the globe. Yeah, that is right. That is right. That that even if we take the credible, and it is credible, I think that's the reason why I brought it up, and I wanted to hear what you guys had to think about it. That I think it is credible that a Europe without NATO is a Europe that falls into internal conflict as it has in the past. But it feels like something of an inevitability, doesn't it? That it seems as though the system of capital, as it begins to run out of steam and as it extracts and abandons, that it seems somewhat inevitable that these countries are going to renew their internal conflicts with one another. Like Germany, for example, and Mocked, if you're still in the chat, please correct me if I say something incorrect. Germany is beginning to spend an awful lot on military for itself, right? And you kind of look at what's going on with this crisis over here. Oh, don't worry about it, Demand Batter. I was just checking the... And Ken Cincos, good to see you. Ken Cincos, Demand Batter, glad to see you guys are here. We were just checking the delay, because I was worried there was like a big, long delay. But no, the delay is perfectly fine. So you can also write a 1 in chat if you want, Demand Better. If you want to fit in, you can just hit the 1, right? Also, a good opportunity to like, share, and subscribe. Give me $1. Makes me feel good about myself. Germany is arming itself and increasing its military expenditures. There's a lot of talk. One of the funniest, I mean horribly funny, but funny anyway, is that like Germany is like looking at the United States being like, so you want us to arm up militarily, cross through Poland, and enter Ukraine? Is that what we're being told? It's like, oh, have we heard that narrative before from Germany? I feel like we've heard that narrative from Germany before. And I have a lot of concerns. Yeah, military-industrial complex is very happy about Germany arming up. Well, and I feel like Germany feels like it feels like it has to, I think is what it is. You've got the largest military on the planet signaling that they're about to elect a leader who is actively saying to Germany and France and Spain and like NATO that it might withdraw from NATO and leave Europe to fend for itself. Simultaneously, you have Russia, a rival, let's call it, of Germany, entering the borders of a country that is ostensibly attempting to join the EU and NATO. Oh, so Anime, you literally were just like putting ones in the chat because you wanted to fit in? Is that what happened? That's so funny. Eric with the rebel. Eric with the rebellion. Like, that's a... this is going to be a nut show, man. Like, this is going to be crazy. And unless things change drastically, it's going to be cold all winter in Germany. Yeah, and I was just about to talk about that in Nova Scotia, which is... You're absolutely right. That because of the decisions that are being made by the current leadership in Germany, and this is true across much of Europe, they're going to get cut off from Russian gas, even more so. And I think that there's going to be a lot of sea changes throughout Europe. That you're going to see a lot of currently sitting leadership deposed. Because, like, populaces will generally allow incumbents to sit for quite some time, right? For quite some time. You take a look at Canada's own politics is a good case in point. We're basically allowing Trudeau to sit for forever, even though he's this like wet blanket loser. But once they start to go hungry, once they start to get cold, that's when people will really start doing shit. I don't know, maybe they shouldn't be siding with Americans, just a thought. Yeah. Ursula Band are crazy? Ursula Band are crazy? I mean, now you're talking about just like this is a long-standing... And of course, America leaving NATO is just like another self-destructive behavior, right? If America leaves NATO, all it's going to do is continue to incentivize Europe to push in the direction of China. Like, that's all it's going to do. Like, Europe, like, the United States is just acting as though, like, Europe is always going to remain on the side of the Americans because of why? Because of, like, whiteness, I guess? We're the civilized American, we're the civilized whites. Of course we're always going to be connected and allied with one another, right? Of course that's always going to be the case. Well, you know, basic human dignity and comfort counts for something, to a degree. I tend to agree with you guys, though. Like, I would theoretically like to see NATO dismantled, but I think we do have to accept that should NATO begin to dismantle itself, war in Europe will follow. It's pretty unbelievable to me that there would be anything other than internal war. And I'm not... I am really like... Yeah, I'm of two minds. Like, the people of Europe probably do not want a war, right? They never do. The people never want war, right? But there does come a point where you got to be like, guys, like, have you noticed how your system continuously generates endless war? Have you noticed how it's just a constant perpetuation of warfare? Do you maybe want to do something about this? I know I would. Enemy. Yes, I want it to fit in. That's hilarious, Enemy. Enemy just getting into the in group. Here we go. Here's the article. Why, if it isn't the consequences of my actions? Is the current war in Europe not internal war? Or are you talking about wars within NATO? Yeah, that's what I mean, Ben. Like, and would you say that the war here is an internal war? Because to me, I feel like the narrative, the big meta narrative between Russia and Ukraine here and NATO really is a drawing of the line in the sand. Like, if I were to take the longer historical view and think about the narrative of what's happening here, is that this is the moment, more so than any other moment in the modern era, where a line has been drawn in the sand and Europe and Russia are officially saying to one another, we will never be allies. Like, that to me is so crucial in the narrative of all of this, that for a while, post the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was this ongoing conversation and illusions and idea that perhaps Russia could be brought in to the larger European system. And Russia was being permitted into like the G8. Russia was being permitted into the international banking system. Russia was being permitted to enter these sorts of agreements and arrangements. But very steadily, that has been eroding. And that there have been conflicts between Russia and America especially. Like the Georgian conflict, right? The Georgian War was one that occurred but kind of got swept away because of the invasion of Iraq at the same time. And so people didn't really like hyper focus on it. It wasn't the big moment for many people. Even something like the seizure of Crimea wasn't really the line in the sand. When Russia applied to be part of NATO and was denied, I think that was the line in the sand for Russia. I think that's the moment when Russia said, we will never be allies with these people. It will never actually occur. But for Europe, the invasion of Ukraine was finally the moment where these two forces in the world are actually separate and are actually different. So it's different than what I think I'm talking about, which is straight up like NATO countries, like France and the United Kingdom, right? France and the UK, like for God's sakes, they had a 100-year war, like a 100-year war between the two of them, right? That doesn't just evaporate into nothingness, right? World War II, for God's sakes, like Germany, Italy, France, Spain, United Kingdom, like Poland, all this shit. It seems likely to me that there's going to be some kind of internal fight between these nations at some point in the future. And so we'll see how it all shakes out. America leaving NATO, I think, would be the beginning of that process. That should America actually leave NATO and and essentially make it so that the European nations are left to their own devices to negotiate with one another about how things should move forward, war will follow. I think that's more what I'm trying to say. America leaving NATO is a blatant representation of how they just want to start wars. That's all America has ever wanted. Yeah, America communicates with the world through war. Okay, Milo, no more, dude. No more. Stop whining about it, okay? You've had plenty of peanut butter. You're a good boy. This guy's over here looking at his Kong, crying like a little baby. I feel like one of the best texts that's ever been written on this idea of America's desire for war comes from Chris Hedges in his book War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, where he talks about the American desire for war. And it's not just the American desire. I think it is a human desire for war. The Greeks, for God's sakes, the Greeks created a god of war, right? They acknowledged that war itself was a force that could sweep through populaces, and there could be a desire to seize on to this spirit of war, much like how there's a spirit of love or a god of vengeance or a god of celebration, right? That humans throughout history have understood that war is a form of communication, and the United States reaches for that form of communication more readily, more virulently, and more celebratorily than any other nation on the planet, for sure. Because its entire history has been one of war, right? Like its national history that they celebrate is one of war, right? The War of Independence, right? When we declared our independence from the British, right? Like, we're still waving around a document that was written by slavers during war. The expansion of America is a tale of war, and then the method of communication that exists in South America, Africa, the South Pacific, right, Japan, all through here is one of war, constant war. And America celebrates how it's like the freest country in the world, right, and the freest nation on the planet. Well, they've only been able to maintain that because they've been extracting all of the value and wealth from other nations. Like, of course you're going to celebrate your system if you refuse to acknowledge that it's based on violence. Chris Hedges would be great if he didn't flat out lie about 9/11. I don't think he lied. A 9/11 truther asked him if he thinks we were lied to about 9/11. He said no. It's on video, gatekeeper. I think it's more likely to say of Chris Hedges there that I don't think he's lying. I just don't think he's done a deep dive into it. Do you know what I mean? Like, not everybody is going to be an expert on every subject. And when it comes to 9/11, because, like, I've read literally everything Chris Hedges has ever written. And his position on 9/11 is essentially is essentially that the basic narrative that the planes were hijacked by Osama bin Laden and that initiative is essentially true, right? And sorry guys, one more second, and I'm gonna keep talking. Milo, buddy, no more. You're good. No more, dude. You need some water? You need some water. Oh my god, dude. Like, come drink some water, dude. Chill out. Wow. Wow. Sometimes, man. Sometimes. Yeah, exactly. He's just like, give me more peanut butter. Yeah, Chris Hedges' position, I think, is that 9/11, the narrative that we were told is essentially, like, in the broad sweep of it, true. I don't think he's done a deep dive into it because I don't think he sees a purpose or a value in doing so. Like, he doesn't, like, 9/11 truthers think that there is this enormous cultural, spiritual pivot that will occur within the society once the truth of 9/11 is exposed. right? That's how they think about it. And and people like Chris Hedges and myself and Noam Chomsky, you guys like how I put myself in with Noam Chomsky and Chris Hedges? Yeah, I'm the same. The okay. Like they don't see that pivot. That even if it was shown that it was this big orchestrated plan and there was this big thing that came into it, there wouldn't be, it wouldn't spark any revolution. Oh, I know. And so while I think it's fair, and I think it is fair for people to disagree with things that Hedges says, just like I think it's fine to disagree with like Chomsky and all these guys, but I don't think what he has said is unreasonable. I think that's really what it is. Like you can disagree with someone and still think that they're being reasonable with their position, and I think that's kind of where it is with Hedges. That even if you are like the 9/11 truther type, or you wish he was putting more into 9/11, I think his position is reasonable. Like, I don't think he's trying to be a gatekeeper. I don't think he's trying to be maintain any kind of power. The thing he was afraid of was that 9/11 truth is too taboo to wreck his reputation. It has been showed it was an inside job. Lack of revolution is not to say we weren't lied to. I mean, I haven't seen anything that is. Let's do it, Adam. I like talking to you, Adam, because you always push back on me, and I like it a lot. You're always trying to keep me honest, which is nice. I much prefer this than having a chat full of like simps, you know, like a bunch of simps just being like, "You're the greatest." I was like, that would be fine for a second, but I much prefer this. Let's do it, Adam. Let's do it. You guys want to do 9/11? Let's do 9/11. Because I was pretty big into the 9/11 truth movement for a long time. For a long, long time. I haven't seen... It's not to say that I haven't seen anything. Like, there are clues. There are interesting little tidbits. To me, the most convincing thing that I've seen to show that 9/11 was something of an inside job was when Condi admitted that she was phoned and told not to go to the Twin Towers. That was pretty suspect. But when Dick Cheney, there's a testimony by someone who was in the room with Dick Cheney. I forget who it was, but it was like an official. And he testified saying that Dick Cheney was asked whether or not to send jet fighters to intercept the planes, and he told them to stand down. That, to me, was a very suspect moment. And of course, there's like the Donald Rumsfeld saying that the populace will only accept an invasion into the Middle East if there's some kind of Pearl Harbor sort of a moment, right? 9/11... I almost guarantee that I've seen this. Yeah, I almost guarantee that I've seen this, and it's and I do think that there is something to be said about, like, if you start to become a 9/11 truther, like if you go in on the 9/11 stuff, you're going in on it. Like you are kind of planting your flag and you become the 9/11 guy. And I think it's completely reasonable for Hedges to not want to be the 9/11 guy. You know, and the most look, if you're interested in 9/11 stuff and talking about throwing shade at 9/11, the most interesting book was Noam Chomsky 9/11 book. He wrote a book, not this one, yeah, this one, straight up, where he just like ripped it apart. That it was a book about the 9/11 commission, and let's be really clear, like the 9/11 commission report that came out was bullshit. literally most of the, if I'm not mistaken, most of the people who were on the commission resigned from it because of how bullshit it was. It's completely fair to say that the 9/11 Commission, it's completely fair to say that we don't actually know what happened on 9/11. Yes, Cheney was in charge of war games and intercept protocol, was never questioned why war game exercises weren't canceled, why planes were set to intercept, of course, right? It's this kind of shade throwing, right? Like, it's this kind of shade throwing, and not shade throwing, but like, that happened, right? And we know it's a classic strategy of the CIA and of the military that when something serious is happening, plan war games at the same time to create confusion and obfuscation, right? That's a plan, and we know they do that. So the timing of it is all very suspect. I think the position that I'm willing to accept the most is not that 9/11 was orchestrated internally, but that 9/11 was planned in the method that we were told it was planned by the people who planned it, and the administration knew it was coming and just sort of stepped out of the way and let it happen. That to me is the most believable narrative. That instead of it being like everybody sitting down and creating a plan, that this was the plan, and the administration just sort of stepped aside and let it happen. That to me, I think, is as deep as I'm willing to go at this stage in the game when it comes to the 9/11 idea, because I don't think I've seen enough. Although then you start to get into like fucking the buildings themselves. I remember watching the buildings falling and thinking to myself, that's a controlled demolition. Like, I remember seeing those towers falling and just being like, no way. No way. And the idea that both of the towers fell within hours of one another, in somewhat the same manner, literally, it's the first time in history that any building has fallen over after being hit by a plane. And buildings have been hit by planes before, right? So so it's extremely suspect that these towers would come down. It was planned by people who live in caves. I mean, the Bin Laden family is extremely wealthy. Like, the Bin Laden family is extremely wealthy. That's not believable. Means, motive, opportunity. You can only explain motive. In no way, shape, or form would anyone think they could pull off such a feat. I mean, Osama bin Laden just, like, a scant years before, set off a bomb underneath one of these towers previously. And that we know, right? Like, that's not bullshit. Like, bin Laden was attempting to hit these towers for quite some time. And had the motive to do so, had the initiative to do so, and and it's the pulling off of it, right? And again, I think it's like we know. So this is where it gets into the speculative, and this is kind of the fun of 9/11, right? The speculation of it all. Like, the Bushes and the Bin Ladens are very tight with one another on a familial basis, right? Like, this is what makes this conversation so fascinating and so interesting, is that when we talk about politics, we're usually talking about national politics, but 9/11 actually begins to get into family politics, which is the reality that the Bushes and the Bin Ladens are good friends, actually good friends with one another, right? And that Osama bin Laden is somewhat regarded in the Bin Laden family as like a black sheep, but he's still a Bin Laden. Like he's still part of that family. And this pours a lot of fuel on the fire, right? Because if it's Osama bin Laden that plans this thing, and Bush is the president while it's happening, right? Like, although, frankly, I think that Bush, if the administration was involved in it, Bush was definitely kept out of the loop. Just looking at the tape of when he was informed it happened, just his natural human reaction really tells me that he did not know what was going on. That he was told, right? You have evidence OBL did the original attacks. OBL didn't fly in a plane for how long again without being shot out of the sky when WTC was attacked the first time. Sorry, man. Osama bin Laden didn't fly in a plane for how long again without being shot out of the sky when WTC was attacked the first time. Two completely different events. I mean, it is two completely different events, but it does kind of show a pattern or a desire. And, like, Osama bin Laden wrote a lot about wanting to strike back at America and wanting to bring the war to America, right? That what America was doing in the Middle East needed to be reinflicted back upon America and wake America up out of its sort of torpor to strike back and realize. Like when we talk about motive, I think Osama bin Laden like has a motive and it is your guy, right? Like if not him, then certainly people around him like him. And yeah, jet fuel can't melt steel beams is something I see all the time. Yeah. Oh yeah, guys, don't get me wrong, man. Like, I love the 9/11 conspiracy theory. Like, I'm not. If it came out that like Bush did 9/11, like if it suddenly was the case, like if a tape came out or there on his deathbed, Cheney was like, "We did it, we did 9/11," I'd be like, yeah, all right. I just don't think. I just don't think it. Very much like a lot of conspiracy theories or a lot of these sort of narratives, I do think that it ends up just being something of a black hole. Like, it's not going to fundamentally alter the fabric of the nation in a big or a serious way. The revelation of it. OBL had 22 false radar blips injected on fighter jets' radar. That was a Toronto Star story. OBL made the U.S. fly a plane pretending to be hijacked on the same day. Yeah, no, these exactly, Adam. Like, these stories are very suspect, right? Like, there's a lot of I am not telling you that there isn't a merit, right? I'm not saying that there isn't a merit, but like. Here's a great example, right? Just a key example of what I'm talking about. We know for a fact that Martin Luther King was assassinated by the United States government, right? Like, Martin Luther King was assassinated by the United States government. We know, it's the fact, and it's just like, has this sparked some kind of internal crazy nonsense? Like, the Bush administration itself is guilty of war crimes that we could see, that other countries literally execute their leaders for doing, that we can prove and we can show are real, right? While I think that talking, like, you don't need to convince me, like, we are actually allies within the conversation of 9/11, but all I'm trying to stress is that I don't actually think it's that important. That's the bottom line for me. Like, I'm happy to engage in the conversation. I think it's an interesting conversation. I have a lot of fun in the conversation. I think there's a lot of things in the conversation that are of note, right? But I don't actually think it's that important of a conversation. Like, I don't want to become the 9/11 guy. And I'm not that interested in pursuing the 9/11 guy story. But when I sit down with 9/11 guys, and I'm talking to 9/11 guys, I have a great time. I have a great time. But yeah, okay. I don't mind that. Like, it is just kind of like a, you know, what are you gonna do about it? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, and is it going to be like? Imagine the uproar if Cheney did say that. Like, that's the thing, Ben. I don't think there would be an uproar. I really don't. Like, I really don't. Like, I think that I don't think that it's going to be this galvanizing. Like, I appreciate that the 9/11 moment, and a lot of the very suspicious shit that happened in 9/11 is a radicalizing event for a lot of people. Like, I really appreciate that. And I myself spent a lot of time on 9/11, right? But I think my encouragement is to let that radicalization carry you into other places, and carry you into and I think, honestly, I think Noam Chomsky is correct. Like, focus on focus on the things you can prove, right? And there are lots of things that you can prove, right? Focus on the things that I remember Chomsky said as much. He's like, look, if you think that you've got evidence to show that an event occurred, publish it. Publish it, right? And I don't actually disagree with you here, Adam, right? Like, but again, it's never always one thing, right? Like, so the reason why Noam and Hedges don't pursue it is because they don't think it'll change anything, right? I do think that they think that, but also I think you are also correct to say that they are concerned from a reputational standpoint. Like, I think it can be both things, and I don't, and I'm not mad about it. I think really is what it is. Like, I'm not really mad about it. Like, they look at it, they think to themselves, like, Noam Chomsky's taking down of the 9/11 Commission report is very is good. Like, it's definitely like, that's the reason why I think 9/11 truthers were disappointed with Noam Chomsky, because they thought he was going to go all in on it with them, right? Because of this takedown of the 9/11 Commission report. But Noam saying it can't be proven is implying that it hasn't been proven. There are dozens of published books. So now what? Who'd Noam debate? Nobody. But yeah, because, like, again, like, it's I don't think it is as relevant. Like, the people who are passionate, as you are passionate about it, want it to be so much more relevant than I think it actually ends up being. Like, is Bush being involved with no, but enemy, like, that's actually not really true. Like, I know it sort of was the launching pad of the current conflagration, but Bush's own father had also invaded Iraq, right? Like, there was already, like, an enormous amount of meddling happening in the Middle East already, well before that period of time. That 9/11 is just a continuation, right? It's just a continuation of the narrative. It's not the beginning of a narrative. And is 9/11 being orchestrated somehow, or even permitted by the administration, by the Bush administration? Is that fundamentally worse than the destruction of Kosovo, or the I'm trying to think of things that happened before 9/11. The invasion of 9/11 inside job, super glue your glasses. There is super glue in here, dude. There is super glue in here. I got new glasses coming. They're coming. It'll be 5 more days. Hopefully sooner. Hopefully sooner. And when you tell one bad thing about China, China bad, yeah. It shouldn't be about proving stuff. It should be about identifying what happened, how it changed the world. Yeah, yeah. Ben wants to move on from 9/11. I can't blame you. Adam, keep talking about 9/11 though, bud. Like 9/11's a good subject to talk about. I think it's to me one of the more convincing. Also, Rob, I forgot to say thank you so much for your donation, bud. I really appreciate it. Anybody has $1 jangling around in their pocket, please consider donating. To me, the real fruit was something that Eric said earlier, which was Building 7. The destruction of Building 7 is extremely like that's as sus as you can get. Like, Building 7 wasn't hit, it wasn't on fire, it wasn't damaged, it went down anyway in the same manner that these buildings went down. And when you ask, well, what was inside of those buildings, it's literally like, in documents that could indict all of these administrations. You're like, Building 7 is really, in my view, where the 9/11 narrative, like, there's wiggle room everywhere in the conversation, I find, except Building 7. There really is only one explanation for Building 7, right? And the explanation for Building 7 is that they blew it up, right? Which meant that they had to have had the thing rigged to blow beforehand, right? It has to be the case. There's no alternative. There's no alternative narrative for Building 7, and that's, in my view, where, if you really want to be talking about 9/11 and you really want to be pushing forward on 9/11, and I think it's reasonable to push forward on 9/11. Building 7 is what you want to be talking about all the time. You don't really want to be talking about steel. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, right? You don't really need to be talking about the suspect stuff that's sort of all over and all on this kind of stuff. Like, really, you want to be planting your flag on Building 7. And the reason for it is because there's no alternative, right? There is no alternative. It went down. How? What made it happen? Well, the only way it could have gone down is if they demolished it. It's the only thing that they could have done. And if that's the case, well, doesn't that add a lot of credence to the idea that the Twin Towers themselves were demolished? Because they looked like a controlled demolition to me, right? I think they needed the galvanization for the Iraq War itself. Yeah. Like, they said as much. World Trade Center 7? You think Building 7 is a dead end? Why do you think Building 7 is a dead end? Because I actually think that's the best place to start. And onward, like, I kind of am more or less of your opinion as well, right? 9/11 was just convenient for what they wanted to do. Like it was them seizing an opportunity. And I can be brought to the path of saying that they knew it was coming and they stepped aside and let it happen. That they facilitated the event. Like, that to me is, I think, a pretty reasonable place to stand on because of this very reason. That, like, they saw it was coming. They saw it was coming, and they stepped aside and watched it happen. Who put the bombs there? The evidence is gone. I know, right? The cleanup happened so fast. That was another thing that, like, when I was really following it, I was like, that's suspicious as shit. That, like, instead of launching, like, a full-scale investigation, like, people bitch about what's called the Great Purge, or the Purge of Terror in the Soviet Union. But when you actually investigate it, it was like a full-scale investigation done by the Russian government because of the assassination of a high-level official, Sergei Kirov, I think his name was. And we bitch about, like, this huge investigation that they all dug into. Well, how is... So the assassination of a single official leads to this massive investigation in the Soviet Union. But in America, a bunch of buildings get blown up by some hijacked planes, and the only investigation that was ever done was completely ripped apart by America's most prominent intellectual. Like, that's pretty fucked. Like, that's pretty fucked, in my view. Like, big red flag. Big red flag on it. Right? Like, oh, the most aggressive terrorist attack that has happened on American soil ever. Most of the people who were commissioned to investigate it resigned from the commission, which it itself was discredited by America's most prominent intellectual. And we're all just supposed to be like, whatever. So the real truth of 9/11 is that we don't know what happened. Like, we don't know what happened. Because there's never been an investigation. And all of the investigation that's been happening are being done by passionate individuals who, of course, never get any kind of ascension anyway. Not sure why they think they caught wind of the attacks and decided to help or let it happen. Who would try to do such a thing? If you suggested a terrorist, they'd say, how the fuck are you going to do that? I disagree with this sentiment. I think that... so who would try to do such a thing? I mean... We know for a fact that the Muslim Brotherhood, leadership throughout, like Osama bin Laden himself, was writing documents talking about the great evils that America was doing here. And I think that what you're discounting is desperation and like, if you get yourself into a position of, here, this is how I'll say it. Like, it's very much the same kind of ethos as these kids that go into schools and shoot them up. When you've got nothing else to lose, right? When you've got nothing else to lose, you're willing to do these kinds of heists. Show me means and opportunity. I mean, the means is the hijacking of the planes, and the opportunity is the hijacking of the planes. Like, have a great one, Rob. Good to see you. Like, show you means and opportunity. Like, the plan itself is quite straightforward and quite simple. Right? Hijack planes and fly them into buildings. Planes have been hijacked in the past. And it seems to me quite possible. Like, it doesn't seem to me to be too egregious. How did they do it? And fly as far as they did without being shot down? Yes, now, this is the big question, right? Like, they should have been shot down. For sure. No, Adam, again, like, I find myself agreeing with you. Like, it seems likely to me that they hijack these planes as they planned to do, and the government stepped aside and let them do it. That the narrative, and they create a cover for themselves by doing like war games. So like the events happen here, and all your jet fighters are over here, right? Come on, enemy, aliens. They were able to do it because of aliens. Can you imagine if it was aliens, right? No, but and that was a really big question that was going. What's absurd about it? What's absurd about it? It's a why is it absurd to believe that a wealthy family and the member of a wealthy family, CIA trained no less, right? Osama bin Laden, who has written extensively on the great evil and the great Satan of America. If one thought they'd get shot down, why'd they take that risk? Dude, they were on a suicide run. Like, they knew it was suicide. Like, for sure. Like, they for sure knew that they were going to commit suicide. Like, that was for sure what was happening there. And there are suicide bombers. It's that same kind of ethos. Like, all our leaders could pull off their skin masks and the American people would go to 7-Eleven for a smoothie. Yeah, there's something to that, isn't there, Onward? Just like, yeah, like really, like when we found out that like the American government went, yeah, there's aliens probably, or there might be aliens rather, if I wanted to be more fair about what their position actually is, and the American public basically went, okay, whatever you say. But the goal would not have been accomplished because they knew they would have been shot down and not reached their targets. Ooh. There's an interesting statement, actually, Adam. Like, unless they knew that they had friends on the inside who were going to open up the gates to them to allow this to occur in the first place, they wouldn't have begun the initiative, because otherwise its failure would have been assured. Yeah, I like it, Adam. I like it. That's good. Like, this is not the same as, like, getting a van, filling it with fertilizer, and blowing it up underneath the Twin Towers. Like, these are planes hijacked for hours in American airspace, flying towards urban city centers. It is highly likely that they would have been shot down unless the people planning it were aware that there were people on the inside orchestrating or clearing the way for them to achieve their goal. And so why even do it otherwise? Yeah, I like this. I like that, Adam. That's a fairly interesting point. Like, it's a fairly convincing point to me. I'm like, yeah, like, like, even a suicide bomber isn't going to, like, try to do something if he knows it's going to fail, right? He wants to be successful, right? To have the maximum impact. And I think they were just reluctant to shoot down the plane because it was full of civilians. No, but Ben, we know that, like, the jets weren't able to scramble. That's a big part of this narrative, is that the jets were out of position. right? Or the fighters were out of position because they had all been moved away. And that was a big, even the corporate media was asking that question and being like, why was there not a response? Like, why weren't there fighter jets that were able to respond to this? And it was because at the same time this was happening, there was a training event going on that was taking up all the resources. They turned off the transponders. There were thousands of other aircraft in the air at the time. Lawnmower man chipping in. Yep, you're getting there. No means, no opportunity. They couldn't shoot down the plane because it was aliens. Enemy. You really want to get the aliens thing in there, right? You really want to get the... I don't know why the aliens would do it. Come on, enemy. Defend this position. You've taken a strong position. Defend it. Aliens. Yeah. And this is exactly right. Adam's exactly right. Cheney... we've got somebody testifying to this, that Cheney commanded the lack of the order. That the order, it came down to Dick Cheney whether or not he would order the jets to fly, and he told them not to. Right? We have someone testifying to that effect, which gives a lot of credence, I think, to this idea. So you ask, like, why didn't the planes get shot down? Well, because Cheney called them off. Straight up. They planned the attack around this training event. I actually agree with what Adam is saying. There's too many loose ends in the story for it not to be something like what Adam is saying. Yeah. I know why, because the aliens want to make the experiment to see how we'll react. Like a kid playing with an ant farm. Right? Just like, oh, the ants are burying something here, so we'll collapse that tunnel and we'll see what the ants do, right? What's unfortunate about this conversation, and I do think it is unfortunate, right, is that I still think like, if it can't, at the end of the day, the seminal statement is what Onward said earlier here. If all of our leaders could pull off their skin masks, the American people would go to 7-Eleven for a smoothie. I think that's really what it comes down to. I just don't think it has the... It's a fun conversation, right? But if you needed an excuse to invade Iraq, having the jets go in and have to kill planes full of Americans would have been a good enough excuse. Yeah, like, that's another thing, Compton. Like, why follow through all the way? Like, do you have to, even? Like, the fact that these planes were hijacked and needed to be shot down could have galvanized... Although, the footage that comes from the destruction of the Twin Towers, and you ask yourself who benefits from the destruction of the Twin Towers, and the owner clearly does. Like, the owner took out, like, a big insurance thing. He got a big, huge $1 billion payout for the destruction of the Twin Towers. Right? So who benefits? Certainly the guy that owned the thing. Certainly that guy. But if you need... Yeah. So... But even if it was... You know? Like, even if it was, people on the 9/11 Commission writing a book saying the Pentagon and the military lied to them, yeah. Chris Hedges literally said no when they asked who they lied to about 9/11. That's a problem for me. Again, I just think that, like, I don't think Hedges has done any research on it. Really. Like, and I think it's reasonable for him to just be like, okay, let's go move on. Like, I want to talk about the American prison system. I want to talk about America's wars throughout the Middle East. I want to talk about the things that I experienced Like like you're talking about a guy who like literally went to the Middle East and spent time there and witnessed the war firsthand, right? Like, and goes into the American prison system and goes throughout America and reports about these sorts of things. I just don't think he's interested in it, and I think that and I think it's reasonable for him to not be interested in it, frankly. Like that's and if the statement is he doesn't want it to ruin his reputation and so he stays away from it, my response is going to be, okay, yeah, like, yeah, I think that's a fine reason for him to not want to push his chips in with 9/11, right? I think that he feels the work he does is important. I feel like the things that he focuses on is important, and the writing he does is important, and the speeches he's done is important, and he doesn't want to throw that away, pursuing like something that's going to take him down a big dark black rabbit hole. You know, I think it's reasonable. I understand your position, why it's a bit frustrating, because we would love to see allies, we would love to see people really pushing on that. But I just think that it's reasonable for Hedges to hedge his bets and just move away from it and just separate himself from it. Yeah, we know the U.S. has a long history of creating events in order to go to populist war. The earliest example is Pearl Harbor. Then there's the JFK who shut down the plan for Cuba and the Vietnam War. Yeah. 9/11 fits the narrative. Yeah, it fits the structure, right? You're right about that, Eric. However, our media tries to blame China on COVID while it ramped up racism. We lost 1 million Americans, and no Yankee is ready to get pile-drived by the Reds. Hedges talked about 9/11. Did he? Did he? I don't recall Hedges being that involved in this conversation, honestly. Like, I just feel like, and again, like I follow a lot of what Hedges says. I don't remember him being that involved in 9/11. Like, he certainly was a commentator in 9/11 in regards to its cultural impact. How could you not be? But I don't know that I saw him really get too deeply involved in the 9/11 truth movement, like and in those sorts of big questions. Like, I think his and like the reason I found out about Hedges in the first place was because he was one of the few commentators in America who decried the Iraq War, right? That he and was ultimately proven right. Probably knows more about 90%. Either way, he doesn't need to say no to us being lied to. He could have said, how the fuck should I know? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think that's not unfair. I think that's not unfair to say that. Americans must have been different people 20 odd years ago. No, not really. It's just it's just that they've run out of road. They can no longer export their shit overseas anymore. 9/11 was an inside job. 7/11 was a part-time job. Fantastic. Have you talked about the MTG thing yet? Are you talking about her? I did have something about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying to a British fellow, "Go back to your country." Is there something different? Because, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is like, what a nut. Like, what a nut, right? Like, and the Republicans are just getting nuttier, man. Like, they're just getting nuttier. And it's very, very scary. It's very, very scary that, like, something that, like, Trump is going to get back into office and he's going to have a bunch of these nut jobs to work with. Right? She's crazy, man. Like, she's crazy. You want to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene? Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, what a fucking nut job this woman is. Maybe Hedges is afraid of anthrax, that'd be fair, but then he should quit if that's his concern. No, again, like, I think the work he does is important, right? Like, what a stop the steal, right? Like, this, I think the thing that's kind of scariest about Green is how confident she is for someone who's so stupid. Yeah, but that's just it. She is like a chaos agent, right? Like, she has big, like, People's Party of Canada energy, where she just knows that something's going wrong. She doesn't know what's gone wrong. She doesn't know where to put that energy. So she's just like, and so she's this really interesting combination of, like, being against what's going on, but, like, she's exactly what the PPC is. Something's gone wrong. We need to go in here and clean it up. We're going to fight for what's right, and the solution is to keep doing everything we've been doing, just more. I think she vacuums up the coke. Yeah, maybe, dude. Maybe. But, like, what you got Matt Gaetz in there, Laura Boebert, MGT, right? The Trump administration is going to be, she defended Assange, but still better than AOC, Bernie Sanders squad, etc. on that topic. And that's just it. Like, it sort of reveals that, like this, dude, the squad is a much more interesting conversation to me than someone like her. Like, this is as obvious as it gets. This is a spurned woman who is sick and tired of what's going on. These Hollywood establishment elites ruining everything for the people around here. The government is the problem, and we're going to go in there and we're going to drain the swamp and clear it out, and the way we're going to do it is by getting back to what made America great, which is capitalism. And that what's happening now is socialism, and we need to get rid of it. Right? Like, just kind of, like, it makes a type of sense, right? As long as you accept certain things, right? It makes a type of sense. Like, she's not wrong when she says that we're not doing capitalism anymore. That there is no free market capitalist system in America any longer. That the merger of the corporate sector and the government sector is complete. And these tech giant billionaire businesses and all this kind of stuff can never actually collapse. So it doesn't matter what they do. They don't need to be successful. They don't need to actually do anything. They can't actually get competition. And so everything is propped up and all of this. And so when a woman like her says, we need to get rid of this government socialism and get back to what makes America great, which is capitalism, right? It makes a type of sense as long as you don't understand that what we're seeing is the end result of capitalism, that this is how capitalism is designed, right? So her solution is to just keep doing the same thing. And, but she has that kind of like what's interesting about Green is that I don't actually think she's a grifter. I just think she's legitimately dumb. Right? Like, I just don't think she knows what's going on. Like, I don't think she's actually trying to grift anyone. And she carries with her this sort of spirit of righteousness and this spirit of fury, which you can kind of, like, admire in a type of way, but she is, like, nuts. Alternatively, the squad, I think, is much more Machiavellian in the way that they think about things, right? Like, do I think that Bernie Sanders' desire for the populace to have universal health care is genuine? Yes. Yes, I think that the squad's desire for these things is genuine. But I also think that they understand where the power is and that they can't pursue anything to alienate their position of power. Like, and that's the real truth about the squad, that all of the progressiveness is just their brand, and maybe they do believe in it in a certain kind of a way, but when it comes down to it, they are not going to alienate the democratic power structure, right? Do you think someone like her could be president? No. America's not going to vote for a woman for president. It's just not going to happen. Like, hate to break it to everybody. Like, literally, they just removed the freedom of choice for women through the Supreme Court system. Right? They're not interested in what women have to say in America too much. Like, they're not there. It's not as if MTG is out there on her own. Think tanks are directing her for sure. Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think that's probably right too, Adam. And that like someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene is easy to manipulate, right? Because she has a very reductive view of how the world works, right? Like her view of capitalism and her view of the world is fairly childish. And when you have this sort of childish worldview, you can be pretty easily manipulated. Yeah, Bernie supported the bombing of Yugoslavia. That's right. No, in terms of Bernie's foreign policy, like Bernie's foreign policy perspective is as bad as any of the other Democrats, right? That's nothing new. Like, that's nothing new. Did they actually revoke Roe v. Wade? A lot of talk about it. Yeah, gonna happen next week apparently. Yep. That's the grumbling. That's the grumbling. Hillary won more votes, and that's with electronic vote ringing and tens of thousands, why not, if not hundreds of thousands, of black people who weren't allowed to vote. Big surprise, the 9/11 truthers getting into Hillary won. I'm just fucking with you, Adam. I'm just fucking with you. That's not illegitimate to say. Like, I mean, it is interesting to talk about how fucked the American system actually is, right? Like, it's just such a wonky, dumb system that was created by like slavers riding around on horses, shooting single-shot muskets, you know? Like, the American system of governance is in desperate need of an update. Desperate need of an update. Like, Thomas Jefferson was right when he said that every generation should have a revolution, right? Like, every generation should have a revolution, because every generation should be allowed to reform and restructure the way they want to communicate with the government and with each other, right? And the fact that someone, and this happens in Canada too, the fact that someone can lose the popular vote but still become the leader, right? That getting the majority of the votes is not mean you win. Seems excruciatingly odd, right? Like, it seems very much like, shouldn't the person who gets the most votes? Hillary rigged election against Bernie, which is actually true for sure. Republicans tried to rig it against Trump, but failed. Well, and that's because the Republicans are actually more honest about their internal elections, funnily enough, right? That the Republicans have always assumed that, well, we're all capitalists here, like we're all fighting the good fight, we've got the same sort of stuff, so we're just gonna actually do a proper democratic thing, and that'll maintain legitimacy amongst us. Whereas the Democrats have the superdelegate system, which exists to ensure that black populists can never take over the Democratic Party. So Hillary got rigged by the Republicans. I don't think it was a rigging, though. When elections get stolen on the national level, it goes to the Supreme Court, which is what happened to Gore, right? But that is by design because of the first past the post system. Yeah, majority government, brother. Ford with 18% of eligible voters, right? Exactly. Ford gets 18% of eligible voters. Majority government. And not just a majority government, but an even bigger majority government. Yeah. Yep. In Canada, it's very rare someone gets a majority of the votes because we have 3 significant parties. 4 if you count the BQ. Yeah. It's all just a faff, man. It's all just so fucking faffy. I've got evidence of election rigging against Hillary, Bernie, and Trump. The evidence I've seen on the national level is always discrepancies. I'm yet to see anything that really makes me go, oh, this was straight up an orchestration, right? But again, it's I don't know that it really matters. You know what I mean? There isn't actually that much of a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, really. It's what has changed between Biden and Trump outside of the presentation aspect of it, right? Trump was a more interesting president, I'll give you that, right? That Biden has been kind of boring. What do we talk about when we talk about Biden? Look, he fell up the stairs. He fell up the stairs. He was riding his bike and then he couldn't ride his bike. He said the wrong word once. That's what we talk about with Biden, right? Trump was doing daily crazy tweets. He was a way more interesting president. But in terms of his public policy, in terms of his policies, in terms of the social arrangement, the social agreement, it's the same. It wasn't different. And the different party are really just a farce because it will only go between 2 main parties. No, the electronic vote rigging against all 3 is scientifically proven. It's what the UN looks for when... Okay, Adam, what should I search? Let's do it. Give me a search. Adam, are you part of the Discord? Dude, if you are part of the Discord, you can start throwing all of this shit into the Discord, and I will show it on my stream. All you gotta do is donate $1 into the Patreon, right? $1 into the Patreon, which is in the description, and I will get you in the Discord, and then you can start bombarding me with all this shit all day long. For sure. $1, Adam. I know, Milo. I know. Isn't that right, Milo? Isn't that right? All right, guys. We've reached the end of the stream today. Do you think Stephen Harper was comparable to Trump in demeanor? No. I think we got 2 big things out of Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper has Stephen Harper understood that America was going into a decline and did everything he could to set Canada up to detach itself from America's star. Of course, he's only one man with a single term, so he can only do as much as he can. My official position on Stephen Harper is that Harper was a better prime minister than Trudeau, by a lot. It's not close. Harper was a better prime minister than Justin Trudeau was. That's why when Pierre Poilievre gets elected, I'm not going to be so doom and gloom about it. Like, some people are going to act like the world is falling apart because Pierre Poilievre got into power. But given how much of a disaster I think these liberals actually are, and how ineffectual they've been, and stupid they've been, like, Harper was a better prime minister. I suspect Pierre Poilievre will actually be a better prime minister than Trudeau as well. Which isn't to say that they were perfect, obviously. But, like, I think the thing that... Here's the major difference between Harper and Trump. Which is that Harper told you what he wanted to do, and then he did the thing he said he was going to do. You never knew what was going to happen with Trump. You never knew what he was going to do. You never knew what his position was. He was erratic and unpredictable. And like, case in point with Harper, the oil industry really didn't like Stephen Harper at the end of the day. And it was part of the reason why he gets defeated, is because the oil industry stopped supporting Harper. And why? Because when the oil industry came to Stephen Harper for a bailout, he said no. Because when he was saying, look, this is a free market system. You guys got this privatized oil system, and the justification for that was that you said you could run it better than the government. And if you can't, then you go bankrupt, don't you? And that's the arrangement. And now you're coming to the government for a bailout? No. This is a free market capitalist system. Run your business. That's what Harper said. And because that's what he always said. And it turns out that he actually believed it. Which is why the Liberal government has given way more bailouts to the fossil fuel industry. Bought a pipeline. Can you imagine if Stephen Harper bought a pipeline? Like, and so my estimation of Stephen Harper was, I don't agree with everything he said, obviously, but he believed what he said, and he did what he said he was going to do. And that, in my view, makes him one of the better leaders in the modern period. Simply the act of saying what you wanted to do and then doing what you said you were going to do. Simply that. I mean, we get the child care benefit because of Stephen Harper. Right? How they are better prime minister. The Conservatives always make things worse. They privatize stuff, break the system, while the Liberals has to stabilize. Yeah, but they don't lie about it. You know what I mean? Like, they actually believe what they say. I think is really what it comes down to. Like, the Liberals lie. They tell big, egregious, enormous lies all the time, and you never know what they're going to do, right? In my view, that made this pandemic period much scarier. It was just, you never knew what these guys were going to do. You never knew what was going to come out next. You never knew how they were going to react, right? Anyway, now that I've given you guys that bombshell, holy shit, a communist that said a conservative was the best leader we've ever had. Holy shit. The headlines. Stop the presses. No, guys, that's just how fucking low the bar is. That's all. That's just how fucking low the bar is. All right, guys. We've reached the end of the stream. Always remember, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes that you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.